本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？見えないよ。What's good, Internet? It's Friday, July 17th. Ooh, my voice just dipped. That was like July 17th. And you're listening to Waypoint Radio, episode 328. I'm your host, Austin Walker, joined today by Patrick Klepek.
Well, we were telling high school stories before we started recording, and so it's just a little bit of...
My voice had to crack once here. Also joining me, Ricardo Contreras.
Hi, how's it going?
How's it? You gotta give me more energy than that, Kato.
Hey, what's up? Yeah.
Hey,
I'm
YouTube.
sorry, my coffee hasn't kicked in.
Yeah, fair. You know what? Fair. I've learned, by the way, that caffeine is a big part of if I'm good at Valorant or not.
Oh, shit.
I started being like, I need to have a cup of coffee before I play Valorant. And if I do, I'm like, I had a couple games where I was like 30 and 10 recently,
damn.
which is very good.
Hell yeah.
And then like the next day, with nothing changed, except I didn't drink coffee in that same time slot, I went like 7 and 18. And it's like, well, I guess I just need the caffeine. I just need that bean juice in my blood. Otherwise, I'm screwed. So, how are y'all doing today? How's your week been? You doing all right? Huh?
So, that's just said, as long as it isn't Goya.
No.
Bean juice.
Not Goya bean juice, no.
Ew.
I wouldn't. Ew on many levels, increasingly.
Uh-huh.
God. The week's all right? Everybody have good weeks? Everyone having all right energy? Everyone?
I'm good. I'm ready to go.
Patrick's like, no, let's get to the fucking show notes.
Stop. Look, this morning, my daughter, my oldest, didn't. She decided recently she didn't want to wear diapers at night anymore. Mm-hmm. We were nervous about not that she isn't old enough to. She's been fully potty trained for like a year and a half, but nighttime's a tough one. Nighttime is a tough one,
mm-hmm.
and
you get out of bed. You got to go to the bathroom.
Well, that's the thing, and really selfishly, my wife and I were like, we're already getting up a lot of nights with one kid, and you really want to do that twice and deal with piss? Not particularly.
Yeah.
It's like, what if we just punt that a little bit down the road there, Jessica? And she demanded it. And first night had an issue. And then this morning, I'm getting dangerously close to I'm no longer going to share stories about her because she's getting old enough that I think it's weird. But maybe I'll conclude with this one. And then she'll be cut off from stories on the public on the podcast. But she woke up and I was like, good morning. She goes, did not go pee-pee. And I was like, okay, well, let's go verify, because sometimes, you think that, and then, stuff happens. And she proceeds to take off her underwear, hand it to me, and go, smell it. No pee-pee.
Nope.
And I go, what am I supposed to do in this situation? If I show disrespect,
right,
and that I don't inspect this underwear, she's not trying to be gross. She's just trying to show that she's proud of herself. And so I did what I had to do.
Good dad.
Smell that underwear, and it was dry. And she got a cookie at 7 a.m.
She's taking initiative. She's like, I'm ready to be an adult. I'm out here.
Yeah.
The world is moving fast these days. I got to grow up.
She knows. She's like, oh, I'm not peeing the bed, ready to get a job, ready to contribute.
Wear a mask.
She wears her mask. She's great about it, actually. We got her a pink one. And
literal babies better than some people in this fucking country.
These parents were like, how are you going to send your kids to school? I don't know. Maybe model it for them and just act like it's like a thing you have to do. And they'll be fine. And then also our youngest, she has slept through the night multiple nights. So like I've slept real nights a couple times this week, which is nice, which is great. So that's me. I got the energy.
You're right in that zone where you can do that, right? Because your youngest is still young enough. And your oldest is getting older, but soon your youngest is going to be back in that zone where she's waking up and asking to be going to the bathroom and
exactly. Yeah, stuff, so we're in a sweet spot.
Yeah, love it. When you're not being the best dad you can be, Patrick, what have you been getting up to this week in the
DMs
world of video
Rob
games?
Being like, hey, you heard about Microsoft Flight Simulator code?
Got that minutes honestly, ago. I need to know that too. That game.
You see how many DVDs that thing's coming on?
No, how many DVDs?
10.
What? Jesus Christ!
Games are too big. Shut it all down.
Well, there's no Blu-ray. People don't have Blu-ray drives on their PCs, so they're sort of stuck. That's just not.
So if we want to make a disc, right?
Yeah, and my guess is Microsoft Flight Simulator. Maybe that's like an international. Like, I wonder what. I would actually be genuinely curious, like what drives doing a physical release of that game, because that seems so ridiculous. But there must be like a demographic where they think there's a certain crowd that is not going to go to the Xbox games, their Microsoft Store or Steam. But like your dad, or actually like grandpa, would be like, hey, I'd love to fly a plane with these sweet maps. Because the maps tech in that game looks great. Incredible.
As someone, my grandpa on my mom's side was a big plane guy, and I absolutely played flight sims with him. I absolutely played terrible PS2 flight games with him. It's like I was just thinking about this the other day.
Were there realistic flight sims on PS2?
Not good ones, no. And also no. But the game
they were all like Ace Combat
stuff. Well, there was a game for PS2 that was like a non-combat. It was almost like a Pilot Wings. It was almost like like you're flying around getting treasure and like exploring the world. It's called
Heroes of the Pacific, Aero Elite, Combat Academy,
Sky something, PS2 Sky
Odyssey.
Yes,
Sky Odyssey was a early Activision game for the PS2, like launch era. Had big Pilot Wings vibes. That game was great. It was an early sort of like, I've got nothing to play on this.
I got nothing to play on this thing.
I'm
gonna fly through canyons. I'm gonna land in ancient ruins. I'm gonna try to do some cool loops. Like, I love that game.
The review. If you look up Sky Odyssey on Amazon, as one does, and there's only one in stock, order soon, arrives July 27th through the 30th. You can get it right now for $7.39 with $3.98 shipping from Gamers Paradise, the place to buy video games. But the reason I bring it up is because at the bottom, a lot of these, will aggregate reviews from outside sources, and so there's just a 2000. GameSpot review by Ryan Davis of Giant Bomb just attached to the bottom of this.
See how it starts? Amazon. You see like the first 4 lines? We're in good company, Patrick.
Yeah, much like Nintendo's seminal Pilot Wings, Sky Odyssey blends aspects of flight simulation with easy to pick up but difficult to master gameplay.
Love it. Shout outs to Ryan Davis.
But Sky Odyssey is not a game for everyone.
8.3.
Slow-paced missions and flight simulation influences will turn away those looking for pure arcade action. That's not what Austin wanted. Austin did not want pure arcade action.
I wanted to just hang out with my grandpa, fly around, talk about planes and treasure like you do. Anyway, that's now that we're going back in time to my shit. Anyway, yeah, grandpas are looking forward to Microsoft Flight Simulator and Rob.
Grandpa's like Rob Zachney looking forward to Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Is that why Rob is so good? Because he has big grandpa energy?
He absolutely does.
You know what I mean? Well, world weary, but still loving.
Yes. There's like a fine line between like big uncle and big grandpa energy, probably. I can see Rob. He runs a fine line there.
He does. It's true. I love Rob Zachney. Shout outs to Rob Zachney. Anyway, you've not been playing Microsoft Flight Simulator. We don't know. I don't know when code's coming in for that. What you have been playing.
I'll check on that probably soon. I think that game's out in August.
August, yeah.
The reason Rob's asking is because he's nearing the end. He took this week off.
Yeah.
And so I've heard he's been playing some racing games. Yeah. He's been just vibing, and he's probably thinking, "Boy, I'd love to
just
have a glass of scotch at some Microsoft Flight Simulator and just
Who wouldn't?
Chill."
That sounds great.
I get it. No, I've been playing equal parts. Well, more Paper Mario, the Origami King, and Deadly Premonition 2, which I played more of last week, and then this week has been more of Paper Mario.
Let's start with Paper Mario because I'm curious about this. Did you see that quote today about Paper Mario, about how Nintendo doesn't make new Mario characters anymore? Did you see this?
I've seen that theory.
Maybe in Paper Mario specifically.
Oh, and they're just reusing the same cast over and over
Tanabe,
again?
apparently there was a quote from Tanabe that said, let me see, since Paper Mario Sticker Star, like as in ever since Paper Mario Sticker Star, it's no longer possible to modify Mario characters or to create original characters that touch on the Mario universe. That means if we aren't using Mario characters for bosses, we need to create original characters with designs that don't involve the Mario universe at all, like we've done with Ollie and stationary bosses. Whether a character becomes an all-time hit or not isn't up to us on the development side. I think it's more the case that characters that fans truly accept end up that way. I hope the original siblings in Paper Mario the Origami King will stay in players' memories, even if they do only end up appearing in this title. It's like you're never adding to the Mario canon in this game, or it sounds like modifying, like, oh, we're not going to do like a cool take on Bowser or something like that. They have to be like the characters.
That's interesting. I wonder how much of that is like written out. Or how much of that is like Miyamoto comes in and like lays down, here's the Bible on...
Totally.
It must be
so
written
curious.
Out somewhere.
Yes.
That's just a fascinating idea that they even have those sorts of because like they have the main characters, like like Peach, Mario, Luigi, like they're in this game. I just
this is from an interview called Paper Mario's development team lays it all out over at Video Games Chronicle. Anyway,
yeah. So I have not played a Paper Mario game before, despite owning several of them, including the one that everyone loves, Thousand Year Door. In fact, actually, one of the things I was trying to do when I was like leaning a little bit back into video games during my 3-month leave was, maybe like I should take time to like try and play a video game that I normally wouldn't. And so when I wasn't sure if I was going to get code for Last of Us Part 2 early, I was like, well, maybe I'm excited to play the new Paper Mario because I never played one before. Maybe I should try and spend some time or even beat like the one that everyone says is like people talk about Thousand Year Door as like an all-time Nintendo great, like one of Nintendo's best games, like an amazing RPG with like really funny a world and characters, and it just somehow like I have the GameCube disc on a shelf somewhere, like I own it, but I just never played it. And I like went through all the effort to like find a way to play that. You cannot buy it on Switch. It's kind of strange that they haven't found a way to port some of that stuff leading up to this new Paper Mario, but they haven't, and so you have to kind of go out of your way. And then I got a code for Last of Us, so I didn't. But I got it running, and then was like, okay, I'm gonna move on. But so this is my first Paper Mario, which is weird because my understanding of the Paper Mario fandom is that they've become increasingly agitated with Nintendo's approach to the Paper Mario series, in which Paper Mario started as a Nintendo sort of like take on the RPG, sort of like, which Nintendo doesn't make a lot of RPGs, but they make a handful. And the handful they've made are like when they've decided to do it, like either the Mario RPG on the SNES or the early Paper Mario games have been pretty good and liked. But then like post Thousand Year Door, like the Paper Mario series has kind of been their space to sort of like redefine what an RPG is and like start stripping away sort of a lot of the conventions that people associate with it, to the degree that I'm writing a piece on Paper Mario that I need to finish after this podcast, and like I would argue it's not even an RPG. It's like a puzzle game with like adventure elements. Like it's really more that than it is like whatever we consider an RPG, or when we take those genre conventions. Like, there's no leveling. There's no experience points, and yet there's lots of combat, and you are fighting enemies on an open field and then switching to combat. So it has a lot of trappings of an RPG, but it removes a lot of what we'd normally consider like a lot of the progression mechanics of an RPG. And so, you're running around as Mario with your little crew, and then you get into combat, but at the end, all combat rewards you with is more coins. And the coins are like a currency that's used in all sorts of different ways. And it's worth setting up like why I consider it a puzzle game, which is that your main sort of thing that you're doing in the Origami King is, so when you get into combat, when you see like a little bouncing Goomba or some other enemy on sort of in the field stage where you're exploring, when you interact with them, you can kind of like bop them on the head to either get some early damage, or if you've kind of like upgraded your health, your like overall strength, quote unquote, goes up, which means sometimes you can sort of like take out weaker enemies without having to fully switch to combat. But when you switch to combat, I don't know if you've seen like the combat in this game, but it is like, imagine a dartboard. And so like a dartboard is, it's a circle, and then it's got like individual little pieces throughout there where you're like, trying to hit the different numbers. And so Mario is in the center at like the bullseye section, and then surrounding him are enemies in different spots on this circle. And you have the ability to then rotate the circle. So the circle's divided into like 5 or 6 like interlocking circles. So you have like one big circle, and then like a smaller circle, a smaller circle, a smaller circle, and you can rotate those around to move the enemies.
Like one ring at a time?
one circle. So you can both move the individual inner circles, or you can switch it to an alternate mode where you're like it turns vertical, and so it's like you can. It's kind of hard to describe without like seeing it, but like you basically can like move parts of the circle that are parallel or perpendicular to Mario, and like move that. So like you could let's say there is
pull an enemy towards you or
away
from
them.
you. Yeah, them away from you. And can you also rotate them, or can you only push and pull?
Both. So you have a set number of moves.
It's almost like a Rubik's Cube style thing. It's not a cube, obviously, but that idea of like, I'm gonna turn this one this way, I'm gonna turn this one this way, I'm gonna line things up, basically.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. And so when you initiate a move, like if you're like going to say turn a circle, you can move it as many times as you want, and then once you commit to the move, that counts as like one action.
Gotcha.
And so whether you're rotating a circle or you're sort of like moving the location of an enemy forward or backwards, that you can do that as much as you want, and then once you commit, that's part of the action. Usually get 2 or 3 actions. Like the more actions you get are sort of determined by how many enemies are on screen at once. And the goal is to line them up or bunch them together. So if you kind of cluster them into 4 in a row, because I think that's how many rows it goes back. So like 4 circles. So if you get like 4 Goombas in a row, or if you get 4 Goombas lined up next to each other, like 2 and 2. So like the hammer can hit like a 4x4 or a 2x2 space,
Gotcha.
and then when you're jumping, you can go like all the way backwards as far as like what's in front of you. You get an upgraded power. So it's like instead of like hitting at 1x, you're going to hit at 1.5x. And so the game's encouraging you to try and line up as many of them in the most ideal version possible, and you get bonuses if you do that immediately. So let's say you line everyone up and you have it in what the game considers to be like the perfect formation. Then you have like a ultra power, which means you can probably clear the board in 1 turn. You can sort of just like get in, get out, and combat's over pretty quickly. It's like a really fascinating combat system that also like deeply exposes my own psychological weaknesses to a degree that like was like profoundly uncomfortable. Like I've mentioned on this podcast before that give me a pile of Legos, I don't do anything with them. I need instructions. I liked algebra in high school and had trouble with geometry.
Right.
Like shapes in general just don't make a lot of fucking sense to me. Like I just just generally like they just don't compute in my brain particularly well. And so this game, which is like meant to be easy and sort of accessible, like constantly I find myself just like sweating what is obviously like a really simple fight, because I just can't in my head like do multiple, like when I'm trying to think 3 moves ahead of like how I'm trying to shape this board,
right?
I just can't do it. And it's, the game's not particularly punishing. You're not going to die.
Right.
It's very easy to get health. Like it is really meant to be, hey, engage with the board, and enjoy yourself. But also like I found it to be like deeply stressful and like revealing of my own like brain toxins, which is like my brain just doesn't work this way, and this game is explicitly built on top of that.
It has such an interesting, like I had no idea this would be what the combat style was like here. I very much assumed it would be like the Mario RPG. Why am I blanking on
Mario and Luigi?
Yeah, well, Super Mario RPG was the
that's
SNES one.
Yeah, Legend.
You got it. Yeah, whatever the obvious name is.
Legend of the
real
7
one.
Stars is what I was trying to think up. Obviously, of just like, okay, maybe there'd be some interactive, element where you're a timing based thing.
So there is a little bit of that. So like once you line up the hammer, you can do like a stronger attack with the jumps. Hit A as you go down, but generally speaking, that is not all that. It's like pretty lower priority. That's more just to give you something to do.
Right. Right.
It's maybe a little more important in the boss battles. The boss battles are more intricate, in which and these are actually probably my favorite part of the game, is where, so in the boss battles you're still rotating these circles, but there are now suddenly it's got like a more of a board game atmosphere. So almost like a Mario Party little vibe in which so Mario, you are no longer as Mario in the center of the circle, and the center of the circle is the boss, and on the outside is Mario, and he always starts in a fixed point, and you have different objects on the circle that can manipulate what Mario does. So for example, there are arrows. So you need to have, so like if there's an arrow to the right, Mario will start running to the right, and he'll keep running to the right until you've set up an arrow pointing down or an arrow pointing left or whatever the case may be. And so there are all these different actions that Mario can take, and you need to then manipulate the circle to like set up the chain reaction of things that you want. And there'll be things on that circle like extra power, or to get an extra turn, or use one of the superpowers that he has access to. And these really broke my brain because they really require you to think 2 or 3 steps ahead. Yeah. And then the game gives you different ways of mitigating that. So if you start this game where immediately you're getting thousands and thousands of coins to the point where like this is like a very strange broken currency. But the way it works is that, so like in a boss battle, for example, you probably start with like 60 seconds before the game is just going to commit you to the actions you've set up, regardless of how you feel about them. But if you hold down like the plus sign, you can spend your money to buy more time, and you can get as much time back as money you have, and it doesn't cost that much. So you can like really quickly give yourself another minute. There's another mechanic where you can call in other toads. Like a huge part of the game is finding these hidden toads, like tucked throughout the world.
Like
That's
you
like
do.
a big collectible. Like one does.
They're like
you
hiding. They're like hiding.
You
from
find a
whatever.
toad hidden in a fax machine, and you pull him out, and he gives you a one-liner.
I
and
love
these
a
toads,
fax machine in my world, in my Mario world. I love Mario.
One of the fast travel mechanics in this game is because you are flat, you can go into the fax machine tech that they have and fax yourself to different. Which is not how faxes work, because isn't that just the Star Trek teleportation quandary? Which is like,
this is the Soma.
Are you there, or is another version of yourself there? And thus, did you ever exist?
Did you ever? Yeah.
And so you can call in these little toads, and the toads will throw like little objects that might like do minor damage to an enemy. They might throw you some health. They might throw you a power up, or like an upgraded boot or hammer that you can use to like do higher attack value. But on boss battles specifically, they will put in like a dot that shows, hey, this is Mario's path forward. And so normally you just need to sort of like work it out in your head. Where is he going to go? How is this going to end up? If you spend a little money, the game will give you these dots that like just show this is exactly what you're setting up. And what I found once I didn't find that tutorialized. I just discovered it by accident last night, actually. And I was like, great, I'm going to spend the money every time, because I don't even consider this to be a cheat or a help. I just don't think my brain is capable of like doing this most of the time in a degree that I feel it just makes the game actually meaningfully fun to me, as opposed to just being frustrated or feeling like, great, I'm playing a game that like directly attacks a part of my brain that doesn't work in a way I want it to. That's not like a fun way to spend the time that I'm trying to relax. And the dots like sort of solve that. They don't have those dots in the normal combat, because it wouldn't sort of work that way. But you can kind of fuddle your way through them. You can also run away from any fight, and it's like literally no consequence.
Yeah,
like they just throw away the enemy. Like it's like, cool, you left, and also so did the enemy. Bye.
Right, which means like, oh, you won't get the treasure.
You don't get the money.
The money.
That's it.
Right? That's it. You said earlier there isn't that same style of progression system anyway, right? So like, it's not like you need to grind in that traditional way.
You could literally just like avoid all main combat in this game and only engage in the boss fights, and you would, absent not having money to spend for more time, or like engage in the hint system, it wouldn't make a difference. So you could just remove all of that combat, which is a huge part of it. Like it's what you spend like a lot of your time doing, and not be any lesser off than a player who is mainlining it and just saying, screw all this stuff, I'm just gonna make my way to the boss. The problem I have found is that even though this game sort of like scratches at a weird itch in my brain that frustrates me, it's also the fact that I like the general idea of like turning combat into a puzzle, and that when you solve it, it's like, cool, you did it. Like, you don't need to stick around here. You don't need to actually be level 37. Like, you solved the puzzle. We're going to give you the bonus, and you can just, bop their heads and get out of here. I think that's like an interesting dynamic to set up for the player. But the game seems to be acknowledge that its core combat conceit is kind of overwhelming and challenging, and yet doesn't introduce enough diversity to what you're doing in that main combat to make the amount of time you're spending in it like continually enjoyable. So what I'm finding is that even though I'm like 8 or 9 hours in, I'm at the end of the second world of 6, assuming that there isn't sort of like a special one at the end, which is common in Nintendo games. And it's just like now I find myself of actively getting frustrated when I enter normal combat, because great, like I've done this exact puzzle 1,000 times before, and even though I like the action that it's presenting, they're not giving me enough variety in the literal puzzle element to make it particularly fun.
How are you finding the story stuff? Like it's a pretty looking game. Is it funny? Is it?
It's very funny, but and like genuinely so. Like I don't often take like screenshots of games as I'm going along, and there are like been a handful of times where I've been saving that and then waiting for the embargo to pass so I can share them on Twitter. Now that I've been freed from Twitter jail, I can
Oh my god!
Once again, share my bad screen. We somehow we opened
Somehow.
the show with not.
We've been silenced. I'm expelling myself from Twitter.
You found a way.
I'm self-expelling myself. I did find a way. I found a way to communicate.
That's what they meant.
You found a way, and that's
lock me up. Lock me up. I'll find a way to get my message out.
Then I had to go find everyone's tweeting these every word account. I need to find the Twitter account every word with in my ass at the end and just tweet those instead. Just to
thanks. Good.
You're welcome. Yeah. So it's the story's whatever. It's pretty bare bones. You're really there for the clever writing and one-liners, and that's also the issue I have with the other main component, which is the finding of literally there are dozens of these toads that are hidden away. The game is very much hey, the two pillars of this game are this combat system that is pretty weird and different and unique. And it's going to take some time to wrap your head around, and also finding all these toads. But there's not really much of a reward for finding them. It's just your reward is, the reward is usually is trying to be what Nintendo is usually good at. Is that I don't like finding collectibles in games that are purely just checklisting. Just hey, we've found that we've hidden this thing in a weird spot that you really wouldn't be looking, and it's not that fun to find. And you're probably just looking at a YouTube walkthrough at this point so you can get the trophy. Whereas Nintendo, usually when they do collectibles or hidden things, the journey to getting it is the fun part. Right. It's you've done something smart or clever to discover it, and the reward is really not. It's just sort of, hey, there's got to be something at the end here. But really, the getting there and the 3D Mario games are often very, very good at this, in which then I want to engage in that the hidden elements. Even though Nintendo doesn't have trophies associated or achievements with their games, the act of doing it needs to be fun enough to justify that you're not actually getting much of a reward attached to your account. And in Origami King, it's just cool. Well, hopefully the line from this toad is funny. Well, that one wasn't very funny. Yeah. Hopefully the next one's funny. And because the actual act of finding them is okay. A handful of times it's been, oh, that was genuinely clever. I wish more of them were like this. But most of the time it's just I walk in a room and I use my hammer to hit everything in the room, and occasionally a toad pops out. And the game is just really slow paced. So it's just the combat's not moving fast enough and getting interesting enough as it goes along. The story, there's not that much to chew on, and the exploration part is sort of blah. I'm enjoying it, but I have trouble recommending it to too much.
Go ahead, Kata.
Well, I was just gonna ask, do you start with the boots and the hammer, or is that stuff that you unlock in some way? Is there no progression, or are you just handed all the weapons at once?
You're just there are purchasing and drops that are upgraded versions of each. So the normal boot is pretty weak and can only be used on certain enemies. Whereas if you get the iron boots, then you can jump on spiky enemies instead of having to use the hammer on spiky enemies. So that maybe there's an instance where it's easier to line them up so the hammer hits them instead of lining them up so they're all in a row where your jumps would hit them. And so that might be an instance where you want to use your hammer instead of the boot. So it tries to set up, I constantly playing the game, it's oh, the part of the reason I'm getting propelled along is I can really imagine 12 hours from now, 3 worlds from now, there being enough dynamic elements happening in each battle and different options I have in terms of how to want to approach it, that maybe it would make those individual combat sequences more enthralling. Right. But it's also well, okay, great. Now I need to I have to get to that point. And the world is beautiful and charming, but I don't know if it's beautiful and charming enough to get me there. I mean, I guess I'll keep playing it, but it's one of those back burner games. It's you know what? I guess I'll play another 2 hours of Paper Mario, as opposed to a game where I feel I need to sit down and I got to play some Paper Mario. Right now, which is fine. Not all games need to have that compulsory element. I just sort of want to make clear to folks that have been interested in the franchise where this one sits. It's way over on one end, and it's kind of doing its own thing, and I'm mixed about it. But I do like how odd, how weird it is. I'm glad that it is something different than just a regular turn-based system. But I just wish there was more going on with it mechanically.
How easy is it to skip fights? Or are you accidentally?
Extremely. You just hold a button and then a meter fills that says you're fleeing. And sometimes it fails, but most of the time,
or even not even getting into the bat, can you get around?
Yeah, you can run away. Like,
Yeah.
you can. So you can. There are two things you can do. You can run away from enemies that spot you, and you don't have to go very far without before they'll just kind of go, all right, cool. I didn't really want to fight anyway, and they'll just go away. And then you also have your hammer, which you can strike to do like early pre-combat damage, or as you do like one of the few modes of progression the game has, which is like when you find certain hearts, they increase your total HP, and that also increases your overall strength, quote unquote. And so what that means is the dynamic the game's trying to set up is like, hey, when you go back to old areas with like new exploration tools, you're probably not going to want to fight all those low-level enemies. So if you just bop them, then they'll just disappear off the field, and you don't have to deal with them at all. The problem is, like, I want that dynamic with like enemies that are at my level, as opposed to like just the ones that are old. And like, and there's no way I'm going back to older areas to like clean up the last 6 toads that I missed. Like, I'll find them as I go along, but I don't feel a lot of desire to go back and like sweep through with the, like, one of the items is like this. Like, so you'll get multiple accessories. Like, one of them I have sets off like a ding dong when a toad is near, but it doesn't tell you where. And then I got an item that is like a red floating light that twirls on your head, and that like pulses when you're right near one. So it's like, oh, right, okay, this mailbox, I should probably hit it with my hammer. And so that's setting up that you don't have to deal as much with those enemies when you go back there. But yeah, like I said, I'm not really feeling it as charming as the game is. I feel like it's really relying on that charm to a degree that, like, when I've read around the other reviews, it's like, yeah, I know it's charming. Yeah, it's definitely charming. But like the charm can only take you. And so maybe that's going to be it for a lot of people. It's like however far the charm takes you, maybe that'll take you further than it has for me. Because it's like once the charm took me as far as it could, the combat wasn't able to sort of like make up the ground that was lost from what I wasn't getting out of the world itself.
It's strange to hear you kind of describe this as like not having the progression RPG stuff, but still having certain like the other like bits of like turn-based combat and all that. Because one of the things that I rub up against a lot when I play RPGs is kind of the grind in general and wanting to be able to skip out on it. And something about this sounds like maybe I'd enjoy it if I was able to avoid all those fights in between bosses until there was more to like do in regular combat.
Right, well, like the best part. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say one of my favorite RPGs of all time is Bravely Default, that had a really kind of interesting mix with its in its combat already, and it had fast forward. Like in the base game, you could fast forward like times 10 on fucking grinding. Like whenever I needed to, I would spend like not even 10 minutes in like one area, like with the combat fully fast forward on auto attack just to get those levels. Because at that point, I don't care about that. I'm really more interested in what the boss battle is going to be. Right. So I'm trying to kind of gauge how much of this I could skip and still enjoy.
So it also so one you could skip. You could probably just run around a lot of them. There are like lots of instances where you're gonna try and swing with your hammer and you're gonna miss. And it's like, fuck, all right, now I'm in this fight.
Right.
But if you spend just a tiny amount of money, and you have so much money in this game, one of the things that it does is so in the basic fights, if you spend a little bit of money, in addition to the toads like throwing items and trying to like kind of bop some of the enemies for a few hit points, it will also do like 3/4 of the work for lining up the optimal solution. And so what'll happen is like what's happening is like I get into these basic fights, I go spend 100 coins and I've got like 17,000.
Goddamn.
And then it would make it so that's like I just have to rotate 1 or 2 circles in very obvious, like it's like even for me as someone who looks at a circle and goes, I don't get how that works. I would look at it and it would just like, oh right, I just rotate this and then they're in the optimal spot for me to move forward. So like it does like, I mean, I think you're right. Like that's part of what I think I find fascinating about the series, and even like the tension that the fandom has with Nintendo's approach to it, because it is clear that Nintendo seems to look at a lot of the conventions of the sort of genre and goes like, what? That seems not fun or ideal.
We don't need that.
Yeah.
And given that there's plenty of options for people to like have it, like, look, I fully recognize that people love, the genre of the podcast game and like having something where it's just like tick, this was Ghost of Tsushima. Like, I mean, like there are games that fall into that category, and I get it, but I think Nintendo sort of says, well, like, but what if we start pulling at those friction points and like these conventions, and we're gonna put it in a framework that feels familiar, but we're gonna like start removing some of the things that you expect and play with them. And I think that's cool. And I think this game is really successful in some ways and not others. But I think it's like, it is largely successful in that idea of trying to stretch at that definition of like, well, does an RPG have, just because it has turn-based combat, which this does it have to include experience points and levels? Like, how can you play with the notion of progression and really empowering players over how much they want to, interact with that.
The thing that I've been trying to work out lately as I play a couple of different RPGs. Like I've mentioned before, I was playing Divinity: Original Sin 2 recently, which is a game where I care way more about the combat than I do about the story still, even though I'm 30 hours in or something like that. Of this playthrough, I think I'd done 2 different 8-hour playthroughs previously. And that's a game where like I wouldn't want to skip any combat because the combat's what's drawing me there, right? Those encounters, that design. And then alternatively, when I've tried to play some other other RPGs, including last year I tried to get into the Trails. Is that right?
The Namco series,
the Legend of Heroes, Trails of Cold Steel, where it was like,
this is the one that like I saw like Jason Schreier, some other folks were like, this one is like this game is like incredible. No one's played it.
I know so many people who I like a lot, who I'm like friends of mine swear by this series. They seem like something I would really like. But it was one of those things where it was like, I'm not vibing with the combat, and really all I want is the story stuff. And at that point, and there's a lot of story stuff. It's not a podcast game. It's very much like sit down and read all the interactions, listen to learn to love your favorite characters. There are 1,000 of these games. And it was one of those things where it was like, well, if I could just skip all the combat, maybe I would be able to get into it. But at that point, there are a billion visual novels or adventure games that just don't have that layer. I would rather engage there. And that balance is really hard to strike. And what it sounds like to me, I guess my question to you, Patrick, is one of the reasons I was asking if you like the story was like, well, if you could just skip the combat or you don't have to worry about progression or grinding, well, then you can just kind of vibe in the atmosphere, the aesthetic, and then take in the story. But you're saying like that stuff also doesn't necessarily do it for you. Are the boss battles like cool enough to drag you through? The boss battles are great.
The boss battles are fantastic. Yeah. Like it is the kind of thing where every time you get to one, like I sit up in my seat. I'm like, I turn it. I take the switch off. I take the switch off handheld mode. I put it in a docked.
Right.
And I'm like, all right,
here we
let's go. Like,
that's a cool feeling.
Actually, I want to see the full game field. Like I suddenly want that circle and all those little dots that I'm like trying to work through in my head. I don't want it on and I love I have a regular Switch and a Switch Lite, and I love both those in handheld mode. It's the 99% of the way I interact with the Switch. But this is one of those instances where like all of a sudden I'm like, all right, I'm gonna dock this motherfucker, and like I want to see. It's like I'm putting up a whiteboard, and I'm like, I wish my TV allowed for a marker. Like I could, because I would be, or if my Switch allowed me to like write on the screen to some degree, because there are times where like I just want to get rid of the timer. Like I just want to sit here and like do, and because the hang up I'm having, because for whatever reason my head just doesn't deal with shapes particularly well. Like the thing that I know that the game wants me to do, what other people are doing, is like you're visualizing the path in your head. And the problem is with what the game is asking you to do is visualize that path while also visualizing like the 35 different permutations of how you could change this circle.
Right.
And that's where my brain breaks. And like that's where I want the dots are really helpful, where it's just like, okay, that just removes the layer that's frustrating me out of it, and I can focus on how do I manipulate the circle to get to where I'm at, instead of feeling just like
this is impossible.
I'm frustrated.
Thing. Right?
Yeah. I'm frustrated. It's not the game's fault.
Miserable. Yeah.
Right. And I know it's me. It's like I've struggled with it my whole life to varying degrees, and it's like I'm glad that game has it. It's like quite honestly like an accessibility feature as opposed to like a difficulty thing, to some degree. But like it's like I just want to get up there and like. I wish I could have like a group of us who's like, all right, this is what we're gonna fucking do. Like we're going here, we're moving this area here. Like I could see us if we were doing a stream, like doing a save point, like all yelling at each other over like how we're gonna set up to send Mario in for this particular attack.
That's so good. Yeah.
And those moments are so fantastic. They are arguably worth playing the game for. It's just, you're going through, I don't want to say slogging, because that's definitely not, like, I'm in this like amusement park area, Shogun City or something like that, where it's kind of like it's a sort of like a Six Flags / game show sort of vibe, and exploring this, like, all, in the Mario, like, Mushroom Kingdom veneer. It's like, it's very funny and it's cute and it's adorable. It just, like a lot in this game goes on just like a little bit too long, where it's like, oh, like, instead of this being 45 minutes, it's 90 minutes. And if it had been 45 minutes, it'd be just about what I want. And like that same critique applies to the progression of like new mechanics for the combat, where like it just takes like 2 hours too long for a new enemy type to show up. Like it's cool when there's a bat that comes in and the bat doesn't respond to the hammer. You have to use it with a jump. But then also, if you do a jump first, you can do a hammer next. And like, so there are all these different, you can see how you approach the circle changes like really quickly. And I just wish more of that stuff was forwarded. And but it's also what's propelling me forward, because I'm like, oh, like, I can imagine the back half of this game being fucking awesome. Like, once they just kind of get the tutorial like stuff out of the way, it's like, okay, if you stuck around this long, like, we're gonna start making these circles like pretty wild. And I don't know if it'll get there, because I haven't, I'm about like 8-9 hours in. It seems like a really long game, like a 40-hour game. I just don't know. I can't speak to where it goes. I mean, my guess is, again, like, if you chose to not engage in a lot of the combat and exploration, the game's actually probably pretty short. Yeah, I don't know. So it's like I'm really torn on it. I really admire a lot of what it's doing. I guess I just wish it got there a little bit faster. But I'm probably still going to stick with it, because I find myself charmed by what it's doing enough.
Your thing there about like the way mechanical new mechanic stuff, the pace of which it rolls out, the pace at which you're with it, reminded me to shout out a game really quick that I'd almost forgotten about, but is worth checking out. It's a game called Lithium City. It's like $8 on Steam. It's like an hour long, which is a plus for me. It is like an isometric cyberpunky like action game in the vein of, like, it's very much in the same broad space as Hotline Miami, Super Hot. That style of, okay, how do I get through this room? Every level has some new mechanic. Every room has a new variation on that mechanic. You blow through it. I love this. It's an hour long. It's like, I beat it in an hour. I went back and played a little bit more afterwards just to like revisit some of the earlier levels. All of the fights are really cool. I really enjoyed it. There's a really interesting post about this developer's
the last Flash game.
So
what does that mean?
So I think it began as a Flash game. This is what I was going to say. If you go to God, I'm trying to find this Twitter account. I saw this because Chandana. I never know how to pronounce Ekka's last name, and I'm going to butcher it right now. And apologies to Ekka Nayake. I believe that's close. Retweeted a post from the main developer, the creative lead on this, and the journey that this guy went through making this game that was like, 6 years long, basically, and kind of going over his it's called My 10-Year Game Development Journey, by Nico Tuason, or Tuason, Tuason, is his last name. And it's just kind of like, I started making games in 2010, and now it's 2020, and I've made a bunch of Flash games. I worked at a big publisher for a little while. I had a kid. Money is bad. And then he released this game, Lithium City, right before the Steam sale, and it got completely buried. And he couldn't do anything about that. And so finally now, after the Steam sale, it's getting a little bit of pickup. And it's
that's good.
A really interesting story.
Just delete that whole segment. And I'm
gonna reach out to this guy and do an article. Yeah,
it's like, yo, stop blowing up my spot. This is a good pitch.
It's a great pitch. It's a great little pitch. And it's a great little game. Like it's very clearly a love letter to Ghost in the Shell and John Wick, and a certain style.
New chapters in development.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that, because these chapters rip, and there's only like 6 of them or something. So I hope it does well enough to support more. Again, like, it has that Titanfall 2 feeling, where it's like, oh shit, this level has a cool thing, and the cool thing in this level is...
I love that.
Frankly, the Mario thing. This is a classic Mario thing, right? It's like, What's going on in this set of levels? Okay. So like, one of the things in the trailer is, there's a level and it's not even a whole. It's not. I don't even think it's the entire multiple like. It's not every stage in this level. There's one stage where a giant like gunship is chasing you around the entire level, shooting in through the windows of this high rise that you're going through. And it's like that's just there for that one level, and it's cool, and it's a cool idea. He hits it and he moves on. And that's every. There's one where you're in a little tiny train car, and it's like people you have to stop, and more people get on the train car, more enemies get on the train car at each stop. Cool, done. I'm not going to spoil more of them because they're all like very interesting little variations on what is a very simple, basic design. Again, that's called Lithium City, and it is in every way kind of the opposite of that. Oh, I wish this thing would be half as long. It's very much like this is literally exactly as long as this idea has in it, and then we're gonna move on to the next idea. So go check that out.
And that's really tough. I imagine.
I can't imagine.
There's this piece. I'll put this out here if folks wanted to chime in that listen. But like I've been kicking around this piece in response to a lot of the Last of Us stuff, which is basically the premise is like why are video games so long, rather than just saying like video games are too long. Which I agree with that like generalized criticism.
Yeah.
But I have to imagine like some of the issue like that comes up here with like a Paper Mario is like often has less to do with I'm sure it has some degree to do with like, players expect X amount of quote unquote value from their purchase. Like that is certainly like a significant factor, I think, like in that discussion. But also it's just got to be difficult to just like you come up with a good idea and like, woof, time to throw it away and come up with another one.
Yeah.
So I think like there's like a tension between like those two things where like I always admire games that have honestly the audacity to be like, this is a good idea. In fact, we're going to leave you wanting more rather than like fully like squeezing everything out of it. Cause that's like I imagine really difficult to find the balance on, especially if you're a creator where you lose all sight of like, how fresh is this anyway? You know what I mean? Like, I just imagine that's like a really difficult thing to balance. So games that like are like notable in how fast they get rid of good new ideas in pursuit of the next one, I always find to be really fascinating.
Totally. We should go to break, and we'll come back and talk about more about some games. BRB. All right, we are back. Patrick, the other game we talked about, I think, is more complicated in many ways.
Yeah.
Is Deadly Premonition 2.
A Blessing in Disguise, I think is
it?
subtitle. Well, no, that's the actual name of it. I wasn't being cheeky.
No, but I'm saying, is it?
Oh, I don't know. I've played 4 or 5 hours of it. I've always had complicated thoughts about Deadly Premonition, especially because when I played that original game, I didn't watch Twin Peaks until like the 3rd season, and then rushed through seasons 1 and 2, and then didn't watch the 3rd season because of something I can't remember. And so I was charmed by Deadly Premonition, but also never quite was able to settle on like is Swery, the sort of like a creative director of Deadly Premonition. Like, does he understand like how much of what is going on here is intentional? How much of it is? Are we all just collectively making fun of a bad game, and the creator just decided to like, haha, I know I am laughing with you,
like the Room style Tommy Wiseau shit.
Yeah. And I think like history has proven out later, and I think Deadly Premonition 2 to a degree proves out that he like does know what he's doing. Maybe it's a degree of leaning into a thing that people liked more than he intended to at first, but it has very much become sort of a part of his veneer. I think you and I both like tried to get around to playing The Missing, which I
played a little bit of it.
Yeah, I played like an hour and a half. I played a
little bit more than that, but yeah, go. Yeah.
Well, I just found mechanically it to be sort of blah, and then didn't get far enough to like quite understand. Because like a lot of like critics and writers that I have a profound respect for, like really look at The Missing, which is a game about like understanding like your body. Like it's been like highly praised as a like queer focused story in a way that
specifically like a trans story, right? Like
yes.
I revisited this in light of, I mean, God, this is the thing with Swery and with Deadly Premonition is that like Deadly Premonition 1 towards the end of that game, without getting into spoilers, really has some deeply transphobic bullshit in it. And in The Missing, this is a game that was praised. I went around last week and looked up some of reread some of those pieces by like Laura Kate Dale and Julie Muncie.
Yeah, Julie Muncie's just to shout it out.
Critics. Yeah,
this queer horror game forced you to literally tear yourself apart.
Right.
Julie wrote a piece for The Verge, which is, if you want to get a sense of like the broader, why was this game so heralded by the queer critics in particular, I think Julie like nails what was why it resonated with so many people.
Totally. And so coming into Deadly Premonition 2, I think that's been part
I guess
of
also
that.
If we're bringing up The Missing, we also should point out the
right. Fuck.
Yeah.
Matt Conn, CONN, was in the credits of that game. Matt Conn had been previously what's the word I'm looking
Gamer
for?
X. He was a founder and organizer
of
Gamer X.
Of Gamer X, and then ousted after sexual harassment, mismanagement, abuse, bullying, all sorts of other allegations came to light, and he stepped back. And yet Swery had kind of continued associating with Matt, and so even this game, The Missing, that had been well received by queer and trans,
it kind of flipped the script. It was like Deadly Premonition game that was like charming and weird,
right?
Very leaning into the Twin Peaks thing, and then had some sort of like shitty content at the end. And then The Missing, a game that by most accounts, like the content of the game itself, like really great and smart and thoughtful, but then the surrounding stuff of like who was involved in the creation of that game or involved in some parts of the creation of that game and was publicly associated with it, then left those same people who felt seen by the game feeling crummy about publicly championing it.
It's worth saying also, I always forget this until after the conversation, and someone has to remind me of this, that it was not only Matt Cohn, it was also Tony Roca, who was also a like executive director or something like that of GamerX. Also, similar allegations of inappropriate behavior, and Tony Roca also in the credits of The Missing as an advisor.
Gotcha.
So it's like this. It's very clear that there's an association there, and that's an association that I think has led a lot of people not to trust Swery, despite maybe the fact that they like The Missing, despite the fact that maybe they like Deadly Premonition, even
and then Swery comes
transphobia.
Across in both sort of his public persona and in my own, like I've had plenty of personal interactions with Swery over the years. Like comes across as like a genuine nice person who's like deeply cares, probably honestly to like a degree that is more than he needs to, like about what his fans think. And so I think like that's like a tension that like leads into Deadly Premonition 2, a game that so I'll get to sort of the issues people have had specifically with it. When I played it, I will say one of like the first alarm bells I had when, by writing The Missing, like writing a queer focused story, like Swery's, putting himself out there to some degree to like say, I'm going to tell one of these stories. And like, that's, that's something. The fact that it landed and it resonated is not nothing, because that's a big swing to take. And so Deadly Premonition 2, is immediately set. I forget what the city is called, but it's like it's in Louisiana. It's like it's described as on the way to New Orleans. And the first thing you realize is like, oh, this game is going to be completely full of black characters, like everywhere,
right?
Which makes
sense. There
is 100%
one black character in Deadly Premonition 1, and his name is Ushah. His name is Ushah Johnson. You don't remember Ushah? Sorry to give you this.
Merry
flashback.
Christmas, Xbox.
Merry Christmas, Xbox. Wait, you don't remember Ushah?
Merry Christmas, Swery.
You don't remember what Ushah looks like?
Are you looking it up now? Are you sharing?
I know what Ushah looks like. Yeah. Which is to say, he was the coroner. He's like the doctor that you meet when you first get to town. He loves chess. He's stuck on a chess puzzle, and I think the chess puzzle, if I remember right, I played Deadly Premonition like twice, is naming all of the chess pieces. I'm pretty sure that was the puzzle that York has to solve. Like, what's the Q stand for? Queen. Anyway.
Let's
say you say that, and my alarm bells start going off.
That's
Kill Bill Sirens.
That's and that's what started happening with me. I was like, oh, Louisiana. Like, okay, are this? I can see it. Like, this is a city that can have a lot of like, it's Deadly Premonition and has a game with a lot of like eccentric characters. Like, I could see why you'd want to set it in a place like this so you find another set of characters you could play with. But immediately then, when after meeting like the third black character, I was like, oh no, like this really could go all sorts of sideways, especially because every character you meet in a Deadly Premonition game is going to be eccentric and exaggerated and kind of strange. Like, that's part of the veneer. Like, that's part of Twin Peaks, and that's part of what Deadly Premonition is directly
you can
engaging
do it.
With.
It's much easier if, for instance, you're a black creator doing it, right? Atlanta, the Donald Glover show, is filled with eccentric characters. It's very clearly a love letter to that style of storytelling, or not even a love letter to. That's unfair. It stands shoulder to shoulder with that style of storytelling, that like Twin Peaksy, like, is this really happening right now?
Yeah.
Stuff.
Are we in a dream? Is this
Atlanta.
reality?
Right.
Yada,
exactly.
yada.
Exactly. Is this for real? And so you can absolutely do that with black characters.
And even the characters I encountered early on, I'm not even like suggesting that like, off the bat I was like, oh, these are done poorly. It's more just I was like, oh, it's not hard to imagine this going sideways pretty quickly, because it was not going to be hard for me to imagine what is going to be where it'd be easy for someone to lose the distinction between exaggerating a character and then falling into a bunch of really noxious stereotypes. And so,
right.
But the couple characters I encountered early on, I didn't get that vibe. I would leave that to other writers who have played more of like, the 20-ish hours to speak more to that. I will say that's the criticism I've read about the game doesn't seem to have like lifted that up, but I don't know how many black critics reviewed the game, yada, yada, yada. So I want to leave some important caveats there aside. But the game, the criticism it has come under is because there is not a sequence, like from what I understand, there's a Polygon piece that will, if people want to like look this up to sort of like set themselves up for this conversation directly. Well, this is under Deadly Premonition 2 director Swery apologizes for events of trans content in game. There's a piece over at Polygon that will kind of set you up for this. There's a character in the game where York repeatedly misgenders them. And my understanding is this comes in a game where there are points where York is very clearly like not more, and like you were to summarize as saying like trans rights, and yet then the game engages in directly with the character of York, the main character, misgendering this person, dead naming this person, and it seeming out of step with a creator that was, champion for writing a queer story, and then decides to center a trans character to then, not have done the homework to, be particularly sensitive in the sequences that they were playing out in Deadly Premonition 2. So then Swery wrote this piece or this message a couple of days back. It said, "Dear Deadly Premonition fans, I'd like to tell important message." He does like caveat. He's like, "Hey, I just like jumped this into Google Translate," which is like, "Hey, buddy, like you have a producer, like you have a PR people, please, like you're talking about how you may have miscommunicated in a scene. This is not the point to be like weirdly charming, like trying to be weirdly charming with like a Google Translate." But all that said, he wrote, "I realize by pointed out from friends, I might have hurt transgender people in my scenario. It wasn't intentional. I am really sorry for that. Some scenes will be sanity checked by a team that included diversity, and I will rewrite that scene ASAP. So please continue to support Deadly Premonition. I'm the one writing the scenario." There's a lot to unpack in that statement, which is like...
if you click through, there's more to it, because the Twitter thing is, "I'm the one writing the scenario, so the characters are not responsible. My fault. Please don't hate them. Swery." Which,
yeah. It's like on one hand, look, this is how if you want to be charitable, like you take ownership over fucking up. You say you fucked it up. I'm the one that did
and
it.
Fix it.
Like, and they say they're gonna rewrite it. We don't know what that means. What does it mean to have a scene? I'm not making fun of his poor English, but like to say sanity checked by a team that included diversity, like that sounds
my specific thing is like, okay, well, is it Matt? Is it Matt Kahn? Who is it? Who's the?
Well, that's what I mean.
And that's my thing is like, who is around you that you trust to do this work? Do I trust them to do that work? would trans players trust them to do that work? And that's a very difficult thing. And it's tough because it's like, to some degree, making that mistake to begin with suggests a certain superficial understanding of the issue. But that seems contrary to The Missing, which seems like it hit something really resonant for players, right?
Yes.
So,
but I also wonder.
It's a fucking mess.
This is me speaking slightly out of my ass. Like, is the Missing more metaphor, whereas the Deadly Premonition 2 is like very specifically like speaking to? I mean, I don't know. Like, again, I haven't played The Missing. I wonder if like that.
My understanding is The Missing is more direct than that.
Okay, all right.
That
okay.
it does not just linger in the space of, based on the stuff that I've
It's
read,
not just
right?
a
Like,
reading. It's saying like,
right.
hey, no, this is the text.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
My only thought was like, oh, like in working in metaphor, did that like allow for less missteps like this? Whereas Deadly Premonition 2 is specifically being like, hey, like.
I think working in metaphor, from what I've read, this is just me repeating what I've read, there is metaphor at work throughout the entire. I mean, it's a game in which you're using your own body as a way of. You're throwing your body into traps to give yourself like a bridge to cross into a better into the to progress, right? Like
I thought you say almost into a better world.
Into a better world. It's not a better world. I haven't finished the game. I don't know that's a better world. But your body is a bridge towards something else, and blah 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 blah. So like there is metaphor happening there, but everything I've read is like, this is a trans character. This is a trans story. Like not just this stays in the world of subtext. In any case, it's frustrating because like, I've already seen a lot of people. One of the responses I see to this stuff is almost infantilizing to Swery, where it's like, oh, he doesn't know any better. It's like he's just a little squirrel man. He doesn't, he doesn't really.
Well, that's his persona bleeding into people's like perception of him as a writer.
There's also a little bit of that classic, like, well, in Japan. Like, meanwhile, trans folks taking to the streets to protest for their rights in Japan. It's not like, it's not just Japan. That's not, you can't just erase, like, the work that queer activists have done in order to give your fave a pass. You know what I mean?
Or it's like, look, you can say this is not wholly unexpected from a game like this, but then at the same time, you can't say, but the person I like, who's very charming and who follows me on Twitter because he follows everyone on Twitter.
He follows everyone.
Well, not him. Like, I mean,
not
it's
him.
just
Right. Yeah. Totally. Listen, I hope that he fixes it. It seems like he is someone who wants to tell stories about queerness. My understanding is from talking to some other folks who have played this game that it does get into the race stuff in a more serious way, in the way of like, there are black characters who talk about the difficulties that they've had with race. It would take like a real good cosign for me to sit down and play this game myself at this point. Especially so given the other half of this game that we haven't talked about at all, being that it runs like absolute ass on Switch right now.
I am convinced that it was a PC or console game that at some point was picked up to be a Switch game. It's really the only explanation. So if I recommend folks, I think Digital Foundry did this as a troll, but they did a technical analysis of Deadly Premonition 2. The reason I recommend watching is because it's just interesting. Deadly Premonition or Digital Foundry's analyses have like a real-time frame rate, like graphs on the screen. And this is a game where when you're inside, it often struggles to hit 30 frames a second. It is often in like the 20s. And the moment you go outside, you are in not the teens, but like single digits. And there's nothing happening. It is not a particularly detailed looking city. There are no cars. People like the animate, like there are NPCs in various spots of this town, but they don't do anything. Like maybe they just sort of like, the most of the animations are like the equivalent of like a Mortal Kombat like status animation, like when they're getting ready to fight, when you're picking your fighter. Like they just don't, there's not technically a lot happening to explain why the performance is what it is, other than what I presume is that it just wasn't originally meant for this platform and then ran into a lot of technical issues in the porting process. I think that notion of performance is like a really, like, it's because I actually don't think it matters that much, right? Like I think it's funny because it's not just bad, it's like hysterically bad. Like just it is like worth watching videos of it just to like, you think you know how slow it is, but then to see it is just like, it's not quite charming in its own right, but I do think it's overblown to the degree that if this game suddenly ran at 60 frames a second, like it doesn't change anything about it. Like it's not a mechanical driven game. It has some combat, but that's not what it's about. And I do think to some degree it is like arguable that like the technical misgivings of so like shortcomings of Deadly Premonition 1 were a huge part of what people considered its charm. Like, and I think like technical issues, like however you want to categorize them, can be aesthetic, and I do think to some degree that is aesthetic for Deadly Premonition. Whether that's on purpose or is just like a byproduct of lack of resources or ambition, I think that you can assign that in different ways. But I want to push back on the notion that like poor performance thus means inherently a negative. I think we've all played like the idea that like finely tuned, well-running video games is a recent phenomenon in video games. Like maybe less true for folks who have always played on the PC, where you could always just buy something faster to accommodate a game running better. But if you've, like myself, largely up until like I have had a PC for about like 10 years now, but prior to that only played on console. Like I was used to games playing like shit. I was used to playing N64 games that ran at teen frame rates with fog. Like I played Turok and I fucking love that game. So, and I like go play Turok 1 on PC with some of that fog removed. Yeah, you know what? Turns out the fog is part of the aesthetic of that game and it doesn't really work without it. So I just think that there is a degree to which kind of taking the piss out on this game, I think obscures the way that sometimes games that aren't technically proficient, a common Blighttown and Dark Souls, right? I think Blighttown with a better frame rate is a poorer experience than having played Blighttown with barely able to walk through that world. Now,
There's an
was that from Software's intent? Did they say we're going to make this place like run like shit? No, I don't think so. But
they did say what they did say is
we're going to leave it in the game
enough. Right, exactly.
Right. We didn't remove it. They took stuff out of that game. They decided actually this is fine.
Whereas the torches in Dark Souls 2 that was supposed to be there were removed because they presumably weren't running well enough. And they're like, well, this isn't a big enough deal. We don't need this enough to da-da-da-da-da. I like, I definitely think when I think about Deadly Premonition 1, the stuff that feels intentional around that, or doesn't even feel intentional but does contribute, are things like the sound mixing, things like the like repeated music,
the awkward animations, like the
every
animations
time York
feel
says perfect headshot, got him perfect 1,000 times per room. Is that stuff I think is 100% what that game is going for. I rewatched the Deadly Premonition Endurance. I rewatched not
the dueling endurance.
I didn't watch both of the endurance runs. Were you on one of those endurance runs?
No,
that was not. Brad and Ryan, and then Vinny and Jeff. I watched the Vinny and Jeff one recently, as just like a thing in the background, and it's like, wow, yeah, this fucking there is this game that has, for instance, a fast travel system hidden behind a sub-quest, a side quest that it does not tell you about really at all, that makes the entire game way more playable, but it's impossible to know.
Because driving sucks.
Well, except the driving is also the best part, because it's when York tells you stories about movies that he likes. Is that stuff still around? Are you still getting that?
That stuff's still in there. My wife told me to turn the game off. I was playing it on the... she was finishing up some work recently, and I had it playing on the big screen instead of in handheld mode. And so in this game, your primary form of transport is a skateboard.
Right.
In a bit, this seems like the game trying to be a little too cheeky. I actually, like the bit doesn't work for me. Like it's kind of funny the first time, and then you quickly realize, like they're just gonna commit. Like, this is just okay. All right. Now, from what I understand, there is a fast travel option that eventually becomes available. I was like right on the cusp of getting to that before I put it down for Paper Mario. Yes, a huge part of why you want to travel in Deadly Premonition, and this is true in this one, is that like York will just start talking to himself or talking to the character that he's with, and those extended diatribes are some of the best writing in the game, and it is also here where sort of like the bit in 1 and also in 2 is that York is a huge fan of Hollywood, of cinema, and will go into like long explanations of why he loves certain genres or actors, and it's very, very charming. The problem is, my guess is more of this unlocks as you go along, but I was trying to explore the world just to see like what was around, and it just kept looping the same 2 bits over and over.
Yikes.
And every time it would loop before my wife said anything, I started sweating. I was like, I was like turning down the volume. I was like, she's going to know, like it's looping again. Like, oh fuck. And I was like so far from like my waypoint, and I was like just like sweating to like mashing the fast button, like trying to go on that skateboard, York, like shut the fuck up. Like, and if you get off the skateboard, he stops telling the story. So I like kind of get off the skateboard and then like just walk for a little bit and then get on the skateboard, and then he would start the story again. And eventually my wife shuts her laptop. I was like, what the fuck are you playing? Why does he keep telling the same stories? And I,
is it a thing where he has to finish the story so that he can?
Yeah, or he just picks it up again. Like it's just like the bucket that the character can pull out of at this point in the game is only
so small.
this.
And he'll keep, even if he finishes the story, he'll go back and tell that whole story again.
I think so, yes. I believe that's how it works. And so eventually I just sheepishly took the switch off the dock and I put on headphones. I was like, oh yeah, you're
right.
You're right. That's very annoying. So I don't know. I'm mixed feelings on it at this point. Like if they're going to, I'd rather play the game with like the updated writing. I don't feel the need to like play through a scene that has,
misgendering and dead naming and everything else.
Yeah,
and honestly, like at this point, what I'm interested in is waiting for some trans critics and from what you set up, like some black critics to weigh in on whether or not this is a thing that is worth looking at.
Well, I want to know beyond just like, haha, it's another set of wacky, weird characters. Right. Like it's picking this like in the same way that Missing was explicitly telling a queer-centric story, like by setting this in New Orleans and like the characters it's set up, like about one of the main characters you encounter is like a black sheriff, like surrounded by like powerful white people. Like, okay, like you're making a choice. Like you can't tell this story without like you're setting up some dominoes that need to fall. So I just don't feel the need to like. I'm like with you. Like there are so many games I could be playing right now.
Yeah,
I could loop back around to this at a different point and like both see
including
where, like,
games by queer and black creators. It turns out.
Yeah.
God. I quickly want to shout out another thing, if possible, which is
you set a high bar the first time, so
this is not as high of a bar. I don't think. I'm not as in love with it, but it's neat. Darkest Dungeon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Etrian Odyssey.
I love this trailer.
Darkest Dungeon. But you don't know Aria Chronicle, a game I wandered into last week on Steam.
I love any game that has parentheses around its name.
Oh, does this one have? Does it do that?
In the
preview, it says Aria Chronicle Worldview, and it's bracketed.
Or bracketed.
Yeah. And it's like it's so much lighter than Darkest Dungeon or Etrian Odyssey, but it's like it's one of those in that you're exploring a dungeon. You have a collection of characters, many of whom are like just class with a name attached to them that you recruit from the tavern. The pitch, like if you look at the Steam reviews, it's like, oh yeah, this is anime Darkest Dungeon. That's like what the pitch is. And in a real way, they're not wrong. Like you're doing the Darkest Dungeon thing. You're going from like location to location in the dungeons. You are, spending, tracking your resources, spending stamina in order to like dig through a rock to get to the other side. And if you have a shovel, you don't have to spend that stamina to do it. You're keeping track of like your character's HP and mana, and like trying to make sure you've managed that well. The individual fights through the first like act of the game aren't that tough, but there's like a pretty tough, interesting boss fight against a wyvern. And now I'm in the second like big zone, and the fights and like the enemy composition has gotten a lot more interesting. I fought a group of like mole creatures that were defended by big pig guys, and the big pig guys are like in the front line, while the little mole guys got in the back line and then dug underground. So that meant that they were like super hard to hit. It's like until I beat the fucking pig guys up front, I can't get to the guys behind the moles behind them. And it's just like it's 100% if you like that this specific aesthetic, which feels like a little bit like Vanillaware stuff, but not all the way to Vanillaware excess, let's say. But it's in that school it's in that certain visual school, let's say, in terms of color. And
excess is one of the tags for Vanillaware games on Steam.
It absolutely is. And I'm having a good time with it. It's cool to have something in that space that's a little bit lighter than the than what I would say like a traditional like dungeon crawling RPG. Again, I haven't hit any like huge difficult. Actually, that's not true. The first time I did a mission that was like one level too high for me, I was like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. I'm not ready for this. But I just went back and like grinded really briefly. It's like it is one of those things that's a great podcast game. For sure. And it's also one of those things that's like your characters get fun traits randomly, and that means that they have a sense of like, uniqueness or something, even though they're all basically just collections of stats on a screen with some art. Or even because like you'll end up with the thing that's like, okay, like basically every warrior class gets the same abilities. But maybe it's a situation where like your warrior has a special thing that makes them really good against ancient dragons. Or I had one that was like, yeah, you're just tall. You're tall, which gives you like extra. It's like it gives you extra damage against the back row, but it means that you're easier to hit or something like that. It's like, all right, yeah, that's a fun bullshit trait to put on this character. Why not? So I'm enjoying it, and it's again 100% that's that perfect style of like podcasty game. Put it on while you're listening to something or watching something. Grind your way through a dungeon. Enjoy some of the special abilities that are really cool. There's some good like. It's that style thing where it's like, ooh, okay, what elemental weaknesses do these enemies have that I can take advantage of? What status effects can I put on them to try to mitigate their power? Every time I start a round, I do a thing, or every time I start a fight, my main character has like an ability that has a 50% chance to give like a fear effect to everyone in a single row. So it's like, if they're afraid, they might skip their turn. So it's like, all right, I'm gonna start with that, then I'm gonna lead in with my paladin and try to get aggro onto her and da-da-da-da-da. And also, some of the classes are dope. I have a cook named Verona, and she's great. She can heal my party with hors d'oeuvres and with a feast, and also can like try to cook the enemy with a flamethrower because that's what cooks do. So yeah. Anytime that you have like a cute cook enemy or character class, I'm in. That's a good character class. More cooks in JRPGs, please.
Lord Hamlet on Steam writes, I set the game to hard because I thought it would be super easy and a pushover. Might have to turn down the difficulty of getting nearly wiped out by a bunch of bees.
See? Those bees, they patched those bees. I saw that.
That was like a known issue?
That was a known issue. Wow. I think the update from the studio, which is named Crest, it is a Japanese developer, I believe. Where is it? Here it is. This is from the 14th, so 2 days ago as of this recording. 5 honeybees will no longer appear in quests that are level 3 or lower. You will not fight 5 honeybees.
All right, Lord Hamlet, you got to update your Steam review. I mean, it was positive, but now I think you're going to be more positive.
Exactly. Which, that stuff's hard. Like, one of the other things they added was, like, added ways to counter poison early in the game, which is good, because I almost got fucking wiped out. Okay, so poison in most games, what's poison do normally?
Damage over time.
Simple.
Damage over time.
This one was like, oh yeah, the wyvern poisoned my whole party. I was like, all right, but I almost have it dead. I had it like, I think it started with like 300 HP or maybe 400 or 500. And I had it down to 100. And I was like, I'm working on this thing. My characters all have between, let's say, 30 and 50 HP. I'm like, okay, it's fine. They'll take some hits over the next couple of rounds. It says it's going to be on for 2 rounds. And I looked at it more closely and it was like, you'll die in 2 rounds from being poisoned.
Whoa.
Like, what? Excuse me? That's not how poison's supposed to work in video games. I guess that's how it works in real life sometimes.
Yeah.
But I'm supposed to just be able to, like, weather it. So I had to like, I'm so glad I noticed it at exactly the last moment I could salvage it. I had one character who had dodged it, and she was able to like use her turn to purify someone else, and then they were able to use their turn to like use the consumable to purify more people, and then somebody else I think had a consumable that was like, you can, for the next 2 rounds, you won't get knocked out no matter what. But as soon as that second round is over, you get knocked out. And that's like the sort of fun little interaction stuff I love in RPGs and like in RPG combat systems. And so, yeah, it's doing it. And I've realized now I've just done the fucking thing that I made fun of it to a friend of mine when I first saw this game, which is on the store page, it has the sentence, please give yourself a try on Aria Chronicle, the game that makes you feel excited just by hearing about it. And and now I'm like, fuck, I'm telling fun stories about this game. I'm falling into their trap. Anyway, it's cool. I like the character designs. I think that the music is good. The audio stuff is like all the different character classes are cool. They all have cool things that they say. I have a character class called the Invoker, who is just, I don't trust this motherfucker at all. He just constantly sounds like he's scheming whenever he talks. And
he's invoking.
He's invoking, and he's invoking my hate is what he's invoking. Actually, it's interesting because he's like he's a character class that you need to give up a place in your party to let the Invoker in, because his whole thing is that he summons a familiar. He summons like a big genie, basically, to fight alongside of him, but you need an empty slot in your party for that genie to come into. So I'm already like giving this Invoker a lot of space to let him even be on board. And then he can't even fucking summon the genie right away, or the familiar. He has to spend a turn invoking. He has to spend a turn being like, oh, I got to get myself right first. Give me a second, Austin. And then once he does that, he's like a power charge turn. And then after that, he can do an incredible amount of damage to one enemy across like every different elemental type, or he can summon the familiar, which is like a super strong, beefy companion character, like pet class. And so he's cool. But then you end the thing and you get some treasure and he goes like, I'll be taking that, or something like that. He says it in Japanese, but it's subtitled. That's mine. And like, shut the fuck up, Bill. I don't remember what his name is. I'm gonna call him Bill. Go get the fucking summon your familiar. We're gonna fight these lizards. It's just stop being so creepy. Anyway, Aria Chronicle. I'm enjoying it.
Did you see that Gene Parker of the Washington Post pointed out that the Ghost of Tsushima has 2 separate scripts?
No.
So that like I want to pull up how he exactly Ghost of Tsushima.
Have you gone back to that? Have you put any more time in that since we talked about it?
No, I want to. Hold on, I'm trying to pull it up.
Is it on Twitter, or is it just
It is on Twitter. I did shoot. The basic version is like characters that say things in English does not line up with what they're saying in Japanese, and not in just a strictly oh, right, that makes sense.
I see it.
Localization, it's like tonally, like fundamentally
He says,
different.
yes, it's worth pointing out that Ghost of Tsushima has 2 scripts, one in English and one in Japanese. A peasant will say, thank you so much, in Japanese. In English, that becomes, my life is in your hands, my lord. It's dumb. Yikes.
That's bad.
I mean, yeah, I am not a localizer. I am very curious. I would love to see.
That just feels like a lot of flavor. Like
yeah.
They're like I know Japanese and English are different languages,
and I'm not here for like that style of argument. It's like, and you should do a quote unquote literal translation.
No.
But I am 2 wholly different. If the scripts are in fact
those are different scripts.
That's pretty wild. Yeah. God. Speaking of the Washington Post, do you want to talk about the Dr. Disrespect interview?
I thought maybe like you got like a email that's like, hey, your subscription's up, and
no, I'm
I thought it was worth bringing up. This morning there were 2 interviews that went up with Dr. Disrespect, who's Guy Beam, Beahm, who recently was permanently banned from Twitch. Twitch famously, or I guess infamously, really, like tends to not give explanations for why folks are banned. They keep all of those discussions and explanations private. He was also kicked off of Discord, I believe, as well. And Twitch loves to bring people who do things bad back. And I say do things bad because the infractions can like range like so wildly. You know, there was a Twitch streamer who was pretty credibly accused of like injuring a dog like during a stream, and they were allowed back. Dr. Disrespect is someone who violated the privacy of people at E3 who were going to the bathroom and was banned and allowed back. Like Twitch finds itself in a place where, and this is true of a lot of social platforms in which the way they monetize themselves and support like every person doing a stream and not having it cost a fortune is because they make all their money with these really big content creators. The result of which means that if they are to truly police their platform in any meaningful degree, means they're like shoving money out the door. You know, you can't, you know, there are lots of new creators will come along, but Dr. Disrespect is in a certain class of creator where they like to, Twitch likes to talk a big game about like cleaning up their platform, but they, you know, was it Trump got kicked, Trump's Twitch account got kicked off for 2 weeks. And now like his account is back in the standing where it can stream again. So anyway, we still don't know why he was permanently banned and is not coming back. Like that is for Twitch to make that declaration suggests something pretty significant. We don't know what that is. I'm not attempting to speculate on what that is. I don't have any reporting that would lead me to fall one way or the other. You know, so there's no like sort of, sometimes on a podcast it can be, hey, we can sort of like wink in a direction that I wouldn't put in a story. That there's nothing like that here. But there were pieces that went up in the Washington Post and PC Gamer in which Dr. Disrespect spoke about, well, honestly, nothing. Neither of these stories meaningfully answers what happened. Neither of these stories, both of them ask, you know, do you know why you were let go? And in Dr. Disrespect in both cases says he has not heard from Twitch why, and in both interviews is told when sort of like some speculation begins to occur about why he might have been banned, a publicist steps in and says, "Oh, well, let me just read from this PC Gamer interview, which will sort of illustrate that." Publicist. So for this PC Gamer interview, you recently ruffled a few feathers after showing a video during a stream of Dr. Thomas Cohen, and he was talking about some coronavirus theories. You've been open recently and sharing some of your own thoughts about coronavirus and even relating it to things like 5G networks. Even on your last stream, you were talking about David Icke and his documentary. I'm curious in bringing up those thoughts, and I think it's okay to call them controversial. Did that ever result in Twitch saying anything to you or warning you? Dr. Disrespect says no. And the PC Gamer goes on. So you don't think that might be the cause? And Dr. Disrespect goes, I don't think so. In fact, his publicist steps in. We're getting really close to dangerous territory here. So, you know, Doc, we don't know why Twitch banned him, and there's no formal warnings or reprimand on record. That's all legal is going to let him say. And so, you know, my issue, I wrote a tweet earlier today about this, which is that when I saw the Washington Post interview go up and there was no answer to like what happened here, and then I saw very quickly another interview go up, PC Gamer, in which there was no answer to the central question. The fact there were two interviews coordinated, most likely then tied to an embargo, suggests like a coordinated marketing campaign on behalf of Dr. Disrespect's, you know, people, you know, like the folks that do the marketing around him and help him with his image, setting this stuff up. And it made me uncomfortable that two outlets that I like quite a bit, chose to run these pieces in which I'm not arguing they weren't critical of Dr. Disrespect or didn't push back on this like weird line of like, hey, I just don't know what happened. That's weird. They like, especially in the PC Game interview, which has a full transcript, like there's multiple times where Stephen Messner, the interviewer, pushes back on that. I just think I didn't learn anything out of either of these interviews. And the moment that it's two interviews embargoed, tied together, as a reporter, that gives me pause. That am I participating in a marketing stunt? To what end? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe like neither. If that's like, I don't think these pieces come across like further the understanding to the public over what occurred and why. And when in Washington Post reporting, there's a line where they suggest that it's like the deal disrespect had with Twitch was like possibly like $100 million, like a lot of money was like being exchanged here. So for Twitch to have that in your reporting, and then Twitch to say we're no longer associating with this person is a big fucking deal. Like it's like that without speculating about what happened, it suggests something deathly serious that would result in this. And so I'm not saying this interview shouldn't be run. I'm just saying like it would give me pause as a reporter to participate in something that then comes across as a marketing campaign to rehabilitate his image.
Yeah. I definitely see where you were coming from there. It's tough because I think the initial action is. I'm wrong. It's not tough. I think the initial action is newsworthy. I think after that, unless you're getting something new, I don't know that
I don't think there's a problem taking the interview, right? Like I would have taken the interview too. I think the question is then, what do you?
You don't have to run every interview that you do,
right?
You don't and what that means is burning a bridge with someone, and it may be burning a bridge with someone. But like sending them the note that says after editorial review, we realized that this was not something that we wanted to run at this time. We thank you for taking the time to do this interview with us, and let us know if you have any other further questions. Like, boom, done, out. You don't need to run it. There is no obligation. You didn't sign a contract that said if you do this interview, you have to run it. And if you did, then you've already fucked up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't know.
So yeah, it just left me.
Or just saying no.
It left me with a queasy feeling. Like it's just not hard to imagine a scenario where if something, if we do find out what happened and it happened to be something like particularly egregious, that like these pieces would feel very strange as a result, which is like update, like like here's what happened. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It was just one of those things that I understand how these stories get written, and like I've probably done stuff like that too. But this one in particular, I don't know. It just gave me a bad feeling in the
Dude, sometimes it's a lot easier to spot it from the outside, looking in than from the inside.
100%.
And that's a personal fault. Like I definitely, it's not to say we haven't sat on or killed interviews or whatever in the past. We have.
Right.
But
it's hard to sit on content.
It can be very hard to be like, oh, we have this content in the bag. What are we doing? Why aren't we publishing this?
And we know people are going to click on it.
Right, exactly. And that means that like management will get off our asses and we can do the stuff we really want to do.
Well, it's just, and the thing that like really put over the top for me was to like and I think both pieces do like try to go out of their way to like address this criticism I have. Like I think they both understood. Like you can read them and be like, oh, they know people are going to think. Yeah. They know. The thing that like struck me as a little weird is then like while we were recording this, I got like an email from a publicist at the Washington Post. It's like, hey, look at this interview we have where Dr. Disrespect speaks. And she's like, that's not the report. Like that is a larger apparatus operating the way it's going to operate. It just kind of reinforced the queasy feeling I had about it. So
totally. Well, we'll see. My guess is I don't have an educated guess at this point. I know there are lots of rumors out there about his situation. But at this point, who knows? Who knows? Just be thoughtful in your coverage around that stuff. Be thoughtful in your coverage in general. And I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about like when you have that platform, what do you choose to do with it? Who do you choose to elevate? I think there's been a lot of really important and good conversation around the mutual tensions of needing to keep the platform running. And that means doing stuff that is not necessarily your deep-seated interest, your like real reason for doing the damn thing, but is the like, how do we put seats in butts? How do we attend to an audience? While also on the other hand, like how do we make sure that we're not undercutting ourselves in the long run by platforming people and ideas that run contrary to what our like long-term goals are and what we think are productive and et cetera. And like that can be a really tough balance to hit. And it is something that I think every outlet, every publication, especially if you are trying to tackle things that are political or tackle things that are in work in a marginalized space, like you have to think about what that balance is, and you can't just trust yourself to do it the right way. You have to be like constantly engaged with that question of, hey, what else could I be spending my time and energy and like page space on? What else could I be trying to get people to read or watch or listen to? And then on top of that, or in our case, play, right? What else could I be spending this time discussing? It's a difficult thing where it's like, okay, we talked about Mario and we talked about Deadly Premonition because those are two biggish releases this week. And we should talk about those. Our audience is interested in those. But is there what did we fail to talk about there? And I'm not.
Well, I mean, it's like right? Heather Alexandra had a couple of tweets recently riffing on this, where it was the idea is like, is the fact that not more attention is paid to smaller releases, like mid-tier releases, indie games, is the reason those don't get the same sort of attention, analysis, and ultimately traffic, the result of a self-perpetuating cycle. Or as some people just accept it, is that's just the momentum of content, that is the hierarchy, and thus it is what it is? Or is that something that we could change if we chose to change our personal?
It's a matter of will, I think, is the way Heather wrote about it, and I think I think
it's a mixture of two. I think there are intrinsic forces. Like, I just think more people are interested in Last of Us Part 2.
Unfortunately, from looking at our own statistics, looking at who shows up to listen to things, who shows up to read things. I did like a deep dive on some of this the other day. I was just looking over old stats in after that conversation and looking at in 2017 when we were publishing 50 pieces a week, when we were like going at it, what did well that year? And it was like never Games Crit. It was never Games Crit. And it was especially never independent Games Crit, or here's a cool free thing, or here's a thing from a designer you haven't heard about.
Or if they hit, it's because we found like a really clever headline that
or
got
right
people.
Place, right time. Cam's piece on PUBG, it turns out, did numbers for all year. Early piece on PUBG, caught the SEO bug right. And like that meant that a lot of people got to read Cam's take on PUBG, which great. That was a really great early take on PUBG. Like that was a really perfect boom. He nailed it. But that meant
what was Rob's blog?
Oh,
that, like,
the Stardew
just
one,
took off,
right? The Stardew.
Yes.
Stardew. That was an open thread. Remember?
Yes, back when we did those
daily posts.
Which now, granted, Stardew is also content bait. Like that does really well. But Rob didn't write it because of that, and it did disproportionately well, even if you were to caveat it with people click on Stardew.
One of the biggest pieces in 2018, when a game becomes a troubling psychological self-portrait. We saw that thing in the best traffic thing every
Rob is so
week.
Anti writing pieces for traffic.
Yeah,
and
he's like not the service journalism dude. He's not the like.
No, and he struggled so much in that era to be like, I've got to write a thing this week, because like Rob is more on the line with on the side with like you, Austin,
me,
where it's
100%.
like you like a piece is inspired to you.
Yeah.
Where I'm on like the other side where it's like, nah, let's get in that content mill. Like, gotta write something today. And I try to do good work, but like I'm also a news reporter, and it's just like I'm just engineered to like it was just different ways of writing, and I don't do a lot of crit. So, but that's why it was just so fascinating, because it's just because of that dynamic. The fact that piece ended up being like one of our top pieces that year, like always made me chuckle. Always made me laugh.
But there is I think that it is both of those things, right? Because
podcasts also have static traffic, right?
Right.
So
exactly.
there is a certain floor to the people who are going to listen to this podcast. It may rise because, hey, we're doing
a spoiler
Evangelion, or we're doing Last of Us Part 2,
or Kingdom Hearts, or
Kingdom Hearts. But like there is a definitive floor, and so.
Well, this is one of the conversations that I think is fair to. One of the criticisms of us that I think is fair is, given that we know we have a floor, and that floor is lower than what our average listenership is, right? Because you look at a new release episode, it does better numbers substantially than, hey, I'm going to talk about Umurangi Generation for the third week in a row. Even if I think Umurangi Generation is actually a more interesting game that is more compelling and has more interesting stuff to talk about, and I have more real big thoughts about it. That floor is that lower floor is real, but you're right, it is a static floor, and there's a degree to which I wonder is there a way to have that conversation where we go, all right, we're going to accept the lower floor and say we're going to dedicate more space to smaller things. But that's on one hand, we can say that, and at the same time, there's the pressure of, well, there's a big thing coming out. We know a big part of our audience wants this, and it'll look good in the stats when we go talk to
well, I think you can do both.
Stuff.
I think my point was
do
more
our best
like,
to do both. Yeah,
because there's the floor. I think that can give you a better justification that is harder to do with written pieces where you're trying to ride virality and I don't mean click in the clickbaity sense as much as like you just can write a brilliant piece that if it published it an hour later, like you just often can't know why a piece takes off.
How many pieces did we publish and then some news broke and it was like, well, no one's going to read this today. Like this just is not going to find a groove on Twitter. This is an incredible piece from a great writer. This is an investigative piece. This is a critical piece. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
It can just get buried because Robert Mueller said something. You know what I mean? Or whatever.
And that is just less true on a podcast because a podcast is the equivalent of, most websites like front pages don't mean anything anymore. That's like that's not true for like Kotaku has a really important front page because they've designed the experience of reading that website around that.
And they have a static audience in the same way a podcast does. That's kind of
because people go there like, hey, I want to learn about games today. I go to Kotaku, and like that's not Waypoint. That's not most of Vice. That's not most publications generally speaking. Yeah. And so our podcast like is the equivalent of our front page, and so. That's when it becomes like important to think about like, well, what are you surfacing? Like, yeah, okay, it's like, well, you got to cover Trump, but like, there's other important shit going on. This, we can cover Last of Us, but like, we should also make time to surface this other stuff because we know the eyeballs are there. And so, I think a podcast is like a place where we can think about where we have more agency over the ability to do good on that. Mm-hmm. Because yes, is it worth writing about a game and like doing a good piece and putting it out there? But it does suck if no one reads it because, like, not that hasn't accomplished a thing by just doing the act of it, but it's like it's also great when like people can get exposed to it and understand it and engage with it. And I mean, hell, that's why we did sometimes those podcasts that were like talk about a piece, and it's why I did things like Worth Reading. And I wish we had more time to do stuff like that, and maybe we should think about that in the future of ways to do that. But yeah, it's interesting.
It's a
got a lot of dynamics.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's both disingenuous to claim that it is something that is like only it's just generous to say like if only the traffic was there we would definitely just do it all the time because
that's not true.
It's just not true. There are a lot of people for whom games are AAA games in the games press, right? Like
they like those games,
right? Totally. I mean, this is the argument that I made when I first came to Vice before I even like in the interview conversations. Like a lot of people during those interview conversations were like, well, are you trying to build a kill screen where like kill screen cares almost to a fault in their eyes about the independent space and ignores the AAA space? And the argument that I made at the time was like, I think right now video games are not like independent music in the same way, or in certain ways. There are ways in which it is like independent music. There's lots of incredible independent creators.
It'd be hard to build like a Pitchfork, right?
Where right, but like even exactly. If Pitchfork still does review big albums, right? But in games, it feels like everyone, even independent designers, are talking about the new FromSoft game. Even independent designers are excited about the new Mario game. Even those independent spaces, many of those people have some AAA thing that is like, that's my fucking baby. I love that.
They're not separate in the way that like a lot of like Taylor Swift is not necessarily influencing, yada yada.
Exactly. So. Right. And there is crossover, obviously. Shout out to that 100 Gex remix album that just dropped that has like a bunch of incredibly interesting people on it. But the in games like that overlap is real, and in fact, there's lots of bleed back and forth between big studio person goes off to then become an independent creator then goes pulled into a studio system somewhere. So of course there's that back and forth. I think the best coverage should be able to blend those things and ideally put them in conversation. What I think is difficult right now in games is that there is so much that comes back to polish. You look at The Last of Us 2, you're going to look later this year at Cyberpunk and the way people are going to talk about Cyberpunk because that game is going to be so like rich. That game is going to have so much money in it that people are going to talk about how good it is even if it has real problems. There is a difficulty in jumping between that degree of shine and convincing people that their time is worth spending on something that has nothing, that feels like it's a different medium, not just a different degree of polish. Not just, no, this is AAA and this is indie, this is AAA, this is alternative. But like, again, looking at Umurangi Generation or looking at Boreal Tales, another game we talked about in those episodes, like, This is a different thing in terms of what you can expect your degree of interaction to be, what the length of the thing is. It's not even TV versus movies. It's this other space. And I don't actually mean that these are not the same thing, but I mean there's a degree to which the audience for those things are looking for such different experiences sometimes, or there is an audience such, and some of that audience is in the games press. And so yes, it's absolutely true that there are people in the games press who are like, oh, I don't want to pay attention to like what popped off on itch today, or more importantly, what didn't even pop off on itch today, what is like on the third page of itch that no one is going to even see or play. And there are people who only care about that stuff. And the alternative to this, the frustrating reverse of this is there are way more people who only care about Last of Us 2, who only care about Ghost of Tsushima, than there are people who don't care about those things and still want to listen to a gaming podcast and still want to, or still want to hear us, I guess, talk about it, about games. And that like tension between those two things is really difficult to unpack and to do it in a way that I think is honest and rewards every listener of the podcast, right? I'm not in a place where I can be like, I'm in a place, thankfully, where I can be like, I'm not going to touch Last of Us 2. I know I'm not going to enjoy that game. I'm surrounded by people who are going to play that game and dig into it and do a spoiler cast and do whatever. I have the personal freedom to step back and be like, have fun. I don't have to edit anything about it. I quit my job at the right time.
Right before Last of Us 2.
I have to write a review. I get to play. Like there's that shit is that shit. Yeah, it is enjoyable in that way for me. But at the same time, I do recognize that a huge chunk of our audience was dying to hear us talk about those games. And that is that even if I would rather be talking about some other thing, and that balance is really interesting and is a difficulty because there's not a meter I can look at. I'm turning the dial back and forth, the dial called independent to see, looking back at the audience to see when they cheer. Like it doesn't quite work that way. But I don't know. I think we do our best, and we're gonna keep trying to find that right line. For me, I think it's easier to not talk to Dr. Disrespect than it is to not talk about a big video game, to not talk about Ghost of Tsushima. It's very easy to be like, nah, we don't need to. It's chill. We're good. It's like we talked to you. We're not going to publish this. There wasn't anything new here. You just kind of said the same shit over and over again. Have a good one, bud. I don't know. Speaking of independent things, one other little thing we'll probably talk about a little bit next week. I need to put more time into it. I know Gita has been playing in it. Gita told us, Gita couldn't be here today, but Gita did say to deliver this message. Gita says, have a good pod. Tell everyone I love Ooblets. Ooblets is out in early access on Epic. Ooblets is like a farming and monster battling.
Yeah, I thought it was isn't it?
It is, but it's also farming and it's also Pokemon, and it's Stardew Pokemon, Animal Crossing. That's too. If I'm being honest, I think that's too generous. I think I'm far enough in it now where I'm liking it again. I think has a real rough first 30 minutes unless you are all the way on board with a certain style of twee, small burb, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Go
watch a trailer. Like it like communicates its vibe pretty quickly.
There was a paragraph in the Rock Paper Shotgun like review or impressions piece that I read that I think really communicates it as well as anything else can. It's all super cute. Practically everything in Ooblets has a near toddlerish name. One of my tasks was to deliver 20 Nernies to the Gotzaplop for gummies. If I feed a fronty one to the Dumburb, the mayor will give me 10 wishies. I need to find more C-plops, quibs, and a sporbet for the learnery, and I only made up one of those words. I don't think it's true that this writer made up one of those words, by the way, because I can tell you what a C-plop, a quib, a sporbet, and the learnery are, because that's all there. Instead of to fish, you say to sea dangle, and my favorite villager has a printy press. It's that mode of cute that it's okay. Let me say something. It's that mode of cute, and also let me introduce you to Officer Zuffle. This super cute town has a cop named Officer Zuffle living in it, who says to me here, I haven't made any arrests in my career, but I have written up a number of ooblets for mocking me. Dog, why does this fucking cute town need to have a cop at all?
What?
Why do I gotta? I like walked down the road. I was like, "There's a cop here. What are you doing? What are you doing here? I'm hanging out with Pokemon." It's a very. There are times when the tweeness gets grating explicitly because it feels like it's just like dream bigger. Like if you have this world of incredible monsters, one of the first things that happened to me in this game was I met a barista and she was like, "Oh, do you want a coffee?" And I was like, "Yes." And she was like, "You don't have any money. Come back later." I was like, "Fuck, I guess just like the real world, motherfucker." Like,
yeah.
You're gonna give me an Ooblet, which is like a Pokemon, but you're not gonna give me a cup of coffee on my first day in town. I came here with nothing on my back. I guess they also give you a farm, which is the mayor gives you a farm. The mayor who is a child says there's an old farmhouse. So that's something. That's not nothing. That's, that's real. I'm at the point now where I've kind of gotten over that introductory, like, spewing of new terms. And I'm like actually in the middle of what I guess I would call almost like a dungeon. I have to like, I'm in the middle of a bunch of these dance battles, which are like combat in this game is like a card-based. Like, it's like a race to score points, and certain cards give you points when you play them. So it'll be like, play this card, it costs 1 energy and gives you 3 points. But maybe you play a card before that doubles the points of your next card, or gives you +1 point for every card that you play, or steals points from your opponent. There's no like fighting. You're kind of doing dance-offs between your Ooblets and their Ooblets. It's very cute. This is the thing. Is like, I think that stuff is very cute. I think the music is incredible. I think the character design is great. I love how the world looks. It's just that sometimes there is a juxtaposition between the cuteness and the perceived like whimsical nature of it all, and then the fact that what they've kind of done is made a kind of. There's a bit where it's like there are 2 classes in the world. One of the random pieces of dialogue that it seems like any townsperson can say, just like York repeats himself, characters repeat themselves here. There are 2 classes in the world: those with kitchen islands, and those whose kitchens have islands, and those who don't. And it's like, I get what you're trying to do here. I get it, but like, I can't go down this road with you, Ooblets. That's not it. It would land better, I think, if it felt like the design was influenced at all by stuff like that, or if it was, or maybe what I'm saying actually is maybe it feels like the design is influenced by that sort of superficial, very online, like slightly left of center joke. You know what I mean? Say that again.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not going to repeat what I just said.
Okay.
I immediately regretted it.
You regretted saying what you said. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. So I once you got over that and you're focused on the farming and the Pokemon battling or the Pokemon dance-offs, basically, I think it lands pretty well. I really love how it looks and sounds. And I really like, for what it's worth, I really like the Ooblets and their names. I think that's like the right place for that degree of like, whatever we want to call that subgenre of small bean, like online cuteness stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm just, 2015, I was here for it. It's 2020. We gotta keep moving. Move like a shark do. That's my motto. Kato, do you want to talk to me about Destiny before we wrap up?
Sure.
Also, I just want to point out earlier, Austin, you were like saying something very serious.
Oh, okay.
And then you also said that we need to put seats in butts.
Fuck. Well, we do. That's my new invention. I want the butt seat. Just install the seat.
You said it. You're like in the middle of a whole thing, and I'm just like.
That's why I'm a writer and not a speaker. You know. That's why I don't speak into a microphone.
That's a real
thing. For a living. Is it? You do like a butt seat?
Yeah. Hold on.
It's like a thing you walk around with. It's like attached to you at a belt.
It's a seat on your butt. I'm gonna Google that and see if that works.
I typed in seat belt. I typed in seat belt. Being like, oh, it's a seat that you attach to your belt. Shut the fuck up, Austin. You know that's already a thing. What did I think I was gonna see?
We're falling apart.
I'm falling apart over
here. Chair? I think it's a chair. Chair on your butt. Let's see if that works.
On your butt.
Nope, that didn't work either. It's basically
portable.
Like, yeah, they're portable portable chair.
Oh, is it this one? Is the one with the legs?
Yeah, the legs come out and just like
this
kind
guy?
of unfold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, this was on
Yeah.
the latest season of Silicon
Yes,
Valley.
that's exactly why I remembered
I
it.
see, I see.
One asshole that walked around with it clanking on his legs.
That was one of my favorite bits in
Yeah.
that season. That was good.
You got to sit down sometimes. And also,
Yeah.
I bet this is ever since we had the God, I forget what the thing was. Maybe it was one of the portable speakers, the neck speakers. Maybe I'm like, what is the secret use case here? What is the use case they're not explicitly advertising, but that targets like a group of disabled people or parents, or what is this? What is, or people who are on their feet working all day in a certain situation? What is the actual demographic for this thing that they're not advertising because they don't want to just say, hey, we're making this because we know that there's a demographic that needs exactly this. Because they want to get Silicon Valley types to also be like, oh yeah, the porta seat. Anyway, Kato, I promised you that you were going to get to talk to me about Destiny.
Yeah,
it's time. Rob's not here to shut you up.
Every single time. Whenever Rob's not on, I just get to...
You love Destiny.
Except that I'm now also in the fucking crosshairs of Patrick for my Destiny shit.
We're going to just vibe out. Don't worry.
Okay.
I'm here. I got your back.
Did you not?
I'm standing in front
there
of you
was
with
a
my
tweet
arms
living
crossed.
rent free in Kato's head.
There's a fucking... What? That tweet?
Look at him.
God.
Look at him squirm.
God damn it.
Kato,
anyways.
just
talk about your game.
Don't listen to him. You're here to talk about Destiny. Tell me about Destiny.
Destiny's fucking great. Shit. Yeah, they're continuing this storyline of like the fucking pyramid ships invading and all that, and a lot of what is kind of surprising about it is how many changes areas have gone through. Of like, at first it was like a couple skybox changes, like they appeared, like they're here, and now there's like stuff changing on maps. There's interactions with NPCs that you haven't like talked to in years because suddenly there's ships in the skies over their planets and things like that, and like there's just like a lot to do that all has different kind of great story threads. There's also this kind of like little meta layer of like, we understand that the game is going to get smaller in a way because the game is already too big. There's too many gigabytes of game. And so in order to add new stuff, they're getting rid of some of the planets. And last week, those planets were all invaded by the pyramid ships. And you go on a quest line for all of the NPCs that like inhabit each of those planets to kind of help them like get ready to evacuate, essentially. Right, like so they're setting up this like mechanical thing of like, we need to get rid of some of these worlds,
right?
But they're setting it up early in story, and it's really nice to kind of have interaction with these characters that the last time we talked to them was during like Destiny 1 main campaign, however many fucking years ago, And alongside that, they're still continuing the really great weekly mission of, getting a new mission, a new message from the darkness and having Eris interpret that. But now they're also tossing in, alongside that, like Zavala showed up this time, and we're starting to get some of that really interesting, like, all right, the Vanguard being in charge of humanity and like what they do, because like most of them live under, like, as far as we know, like 99% of humanity is living under the Traveler right now, and that's kind of like their sphere of influence, versus the like idea that we need to like, we don't actually know what's happening out there, like we're not sure what we're preparing for, and like needing to get that information, like Eris being the one that's like, we need to continue talking to the darkness because they're saying something, and whether or not it's a trap or not, we're not sure, but we need the info either way to like try to glean something. And Zavali being very weary just because like, no, it's evil, right? And like they're drawing some ideological lines here of like, okay, yeah, like we always known Zavala to be kind of the more if to use a D&D parlance, the lawful character, like very like into organization,
by the book, very like yeah.
And so it's good to like see them grapple with that instead of it being like Zavala's that character and that's just who he is, and it's never confronted, right? Like it's like he's the lawful one, and that's a good thing because you're all the good you're the good Guardians are good, right? Like they're finally really digging into
And that's
throwing the idea of that kind of into question. And that's fun and exciting. Like,
Yeah,
the
that is
story of
exciting.
Destiny is good right now, and there's always something to do that will give you more story in that way that's interesting and not just lore books.
Right.
And the lore books are still also very good. So, I've been playing a lot of Destiny. I've been keeping up week to week.
Awesome.
And it's been really fun.
I'm glad to hear that it's in a good place right now. I know that
Yeah.
like when that game is suffering, it can be a slog in
Absolutely.
a serious way. So
Yeah, like last
All right,
last season absolutely was like that, where like they tried to do this thing where like there was like technically weekly things happening, but the way that story delivered and what the story ended up being just kind of didn't do much to move anything forward, like narratively. So it's good to see them like, and this is also particularly good because this is the first season that they developed fully outside of Activision's partnership. Like it began development
from
as
top
they
to
broke.
bottom.
Yeah. So it's exciting to see like the kind of level of I wonder how much, because it always seemed like they wanted to keep the lore and the like mainline story of Destiny two very separate worlds of like world building almost, where like the lore was super interesting, but the mainline story was always very much more simple and like very rarely interacted with the lore books. The lore books were almost always world building and background instead of like things happening in the now, right? Or things that are affecting the current narrative. And it really feels like since the break, and especially in this season, they've kind of merged those two different narrative paths. So yeah.
Yeah.
I love
awesome.
it.
Well,
Love Destiny.
keep me in the loop. Let me know if the egg hatches.
I swear. Fuck, did I ever get back to fucking the first three? So each message, each message, the is like a single word essentially that Eris has to kind of infer meaning from. And the first three were protected, eggshell, and white. And it's just like
that motherfucker's an egg.
That's an egg.
We're right.
It's an egg.
You nailed it, Kato. I like.
Oh,
Patrick, you were gone for this. The traveler's an egg. We decided.
Yeah.
While you were gone.
The traveler's an egg.
Danica?
Yeah, Danica. No, the traveler. The traveler
just sounds like is Danica writing for Destiny?
Right.
Yeah, Danica is writing for Destiny now. Correct.
Oh, he's an egg. Yeah, okay.
He's an egg. We're right. We don't know. Hey, listen. The traveler.
Eggies feeties.
Eggies feeties. We miss you, Danica.
Shout outs to Danica.
Shout outs to Danica. All right. On that note, we're gonna wrap up. I hope everyone has a safe and good weekend. We'll be back on Monday with more. I don't know what's going on next week. Is anything going on next week? Does anyone have any?
This is a guy.
There's an email about a game.
Rob and I did like a.
There's a game.
Go ahead. What?
I don't know. I can't talk about it. It's under embargo. There'll be games.
There's a game that's under
release schedule gets a little bumpy.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an indie game, so.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
There'll be something.
I see.
There's always something.
Yeah. There's always something. So
I can talk about Valorant. Didn't ever stop. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's true. I hit gold for
Hell yeah.
I'm silver 3 again, but I'm close again.
I keep doing that too.
That's close.
It's absolutely like how
I had 2 aces yesterday, so I'm making moves. Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
We can't go down Valorant talk. It's not interesting. There's nothing interesting about talking about that fucking game. I like it, but I can't make it interesting. So what do you want from me? All right. Shout outs as always to Bowen for letting us use the track Missy off the EP Pal Machine. Find out more about that at waypoint.zone/BOEN. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/waypoint. Follow me at Austin_Walker. Where can people find you, Kato?
At @A_Kato_appears.
And Patrick.
They're going to show Halo next week.
Oh, they're going to show Halo. Oh, is that the big event?
Next Thursday morning, so we'll have to record.
So we'll have to record after that. That's the only other event, right? There's no other events next week.
I think so. Yeah.
The summer of gaming continues. Summer Game Fest.
Shout outs to
the summer
Jeff
of
for
really extending out these E3 reveals.
A lot.
Continues.
Yeah. Apparently, there's a
Where's
developer
Nintendo?
showcase. Oh, there's another day of the devs on the 20th.
Okay.
So
Where's Nintendo?
What do you mean?
They haven't done.
They don't have like any games on their schedule after Paper Mario comes out.
Yeah.
I mean, they do, but like nothing with a concrete release.
No, but
date.
just like,
Nintendo
what if
just showed off
what
the
if
Mario
E3
game.
had
That was
happened?
that's
What
an event.
would they have? Right? Like,
Oh,
what
and
would
the-
have they
the-
shown?
The way forward thing. Did we not talk about that?
The rumor is all the Mario games. That'll still happen. That's going to be their big fall thing. There's going to be 1,000 Mario games on Switch. So
And they can announce that as late as August without it being like.
yeah. My guess is that stuff's gotten delayed because of the coronavirus, so it still all happened this fall. Like, fuck yeah, give me Mario Galaxy and Mario 3D World on Switch. Oops, my top 10 list for the year is just all Mario games I'm replaying. Whoops.
God, did y'all see the Nintendo the way forward tweet and them needing to walk that back and then the reveal of what that game was?
Yeah, very funny. That was funny.
Kata, did you see this?
Yeah. Oh yeah, fucking.
They made a tweet that was like, plus they're like, we're gonna show off upcoming game footage of Paper Mario or the Origami King.
I do think it's important to mention that it was a Nintendo Treehouse stream, right? They didn't call it a direct.
Not a direct, it's Treehouse.
A Treehouse.
Plus, we'll feature a first reveal on gameplay for a title and a franchise new to developer Way Forward. And then, like, you know, an hour later or something, maybe not even a full hour later, they were like, please note that the new Way Forward title featured in
not
Nintendo,
a new Metroid game.
It's a third-party property.
Yeah.
And people were still like, ooh, okay, but it was big enough for Nintendo to tweet about it.
Right.
It must be something we're all itching for. I want y'all to look forward to Bakugan Champions of Astoria. Bakugan!
Fuck.
People like Bakugan.
Bakugan's how I feel about right now. We need to get we need a Bakugan this podcast.
I got a Bakugan on my way to lunch. I hope everyone has a good weekend. We'll be back on Monday with more from Waypoint Radio. As always, fuck capitalism, go home. Bakugan!
That's the World of Warcraft meme, right?
Bakugan! It's like in the Gundam song. It goes Amuro, except it's Bakugan. Yeah. Everyone should listen to the Great Gundam Project. All right, I'm out. Bye.
Yeah. All right, bye.
Quanchus.
Let's talk about this. Let's do 32 seconds. I don't do even numbers very often, I feel.
It's too bad. Like, it's too bad we don't keep these all as an extra part of each podcast, so someone could aggregate, like, create like a data cloud of our time.is activities.
It's yeah.
Could,
if
honestly,
we do not waste your time doing
Kato.
Neither Kato nor the audience. There are better things to do with your time.
Quite literally anything.
Anything. Play a video game. Do a jumping jack.
Or don't like literally doing nothing.
Doing
would be
nothing
more,
would be
enjoying your life would be a better use of your time.
Yeah. In fact, as Sam Levinson says, don't watch the clock. Do what it does. Keep going. Boom. Sam Levinson.
Damn. All right.
Was that the
that's
time?
The time that is quote of the day.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was
like, wow, that's a very like weirdly specific quote to bring up.
Boom, got it. Pulled it out of my brain. I had an English class in college in high school that was like, it was like by my least favorite teacher, who was like the AP English teacher, but she also taught like the public speaking / communication style course. And she like straight up was like, you have to memorize aphorisms. You have to memorize, like part of that course was memorizing famous quotes. And there were pop quizzes on famous quotes where you had to fill in the blanks. And it was like, what is this? Stop it. I'm a senior in high school. This is not it. We weren't like delving into like what made these quotes famous or what their contexts were. It was just like Mark Twain once said, you gotta know.
Needs to have them in your back pocket for when you debate people on the internet.
When you're trying to fill time on a podcast, pre-record.
Yeah, exactly. She gave me, so there was like a at the end of AP English, everyone had to give each other awards based on their like progress like, over the course of the year, and we had an odd numbered amount of students. And so I got paired with her, the teacher, and she gave me an old battered dictionary because she was like, you know all the words, your presentation just isn't there yet. And I was like, get fucked. And then I aced the AP English exam. I got the highest mark in the fucking school. I got to never take English comp in college, which was the best feeling in the world because those classes seemed like they sucked. She was furious. She like despised me because I was like the exact like natural talent doesn't put in the work like style of high school student. Like go to CVS in the morning before a presentation to get a poster board, quickly print some things out, and like
it still pulls it off.
And it pulls it off because like I still know what I'm talking about.
I got accused.
She hated me.
I got accused of plagiarism by an English teacher in high school.
Just too good.
It was just because I wrote too well. She was not a particularly good teacher, so on some level I was like, I've just exposed you.
God. Oh God. Anyway, shout outs to her, I guess. I still have that dictionary. It's in another room. I have it up like it's a trophy still. I'm like, get fucked. I write for a living now. In New York. I'm doing all right.
Just ship her one of those Star Wars books.
Oh, God. Listen, I learned a lot in that class. It was like a very interesting seminar. Like she was just rude as shit. Also super conservative. She made us read Atlas Shrugged in high school. So yeah. So a lot of Austin Walker origin stories here.
Wish we could have. I would love to have heard like just. What is the audio conversation of a high school class discussing that book? Well, I just want to hear it.
A Catholic school with a super conservative teacher.
Yeah.
It was.
What are the themes she's plucking out? What are we talking about?
Individualism, like yeah, absolutely. Oh, like you got a very much bootstrap type shit. It was like that and Moby Dick and what were the other? We were reading big books. That was like the whole class. Anyway, we should do a podcast.
Okay.
Get fucked, Miss Collins.
Can that be the podcast title?
Long-time listener.
All right.
I'm a big fan.
Can you imagine? I love video games now. I don't think that you're wasting your time anymore.
I'm the lady on YouTube playing Skyrim.
Oh no. God. I still think people didn't really misinterpret your comments then. You did kind of say that thing.
I know. I think you were pretty clear.
You kind of said exactly the thing that people said you said. All right.